You're walking through a quiet forest trail just after dark. The air is cool, your shoes crunch gently over gravel, and ahead of you, barely visible in the moonlight, is a slope crowned with angular stones, half buried in earth and moss. They're older than any pyramid too massive to be natural, and somehow aligned to the stars. You stop. You stare. And your first thought might be, this shouldn't be here. That's the feeling we're chasing tonight. Because scattered across the world, hidden under jungle vines, locked beneath temple floors, or lying just offshore in shallow seas, are structures that don't quite fit. Too precise, too massive, too early. They challenge everything we're taught about who we were and what we were capable of. Some seem to rise from the earth itself, cut with surgical accuracy into solid stone. Others dive underground, stretching into labyrinths no flashlight can fully reveal. And a few whisper secrets into the stars, alignments, patterns, geometries that make you wonder whether we've misread the past entirely. These aren't stories about aliens or time travelers, at least not yet. These are the stories of real places, megaliths, cities, temples, roads, and tunnels that still exist. You can walk through them, touch them, measure them, debate them, and still not fully explain them. So tonight, we're going to follow the thread of the impossible. You'll crawl through sunken cities, gaze across stone-cut desert spirals, stand beneath temple vaults never meant to be opened. And again, you'll hear that same quiet refrain. We don't know how they did this. We don't know who did it. And we definitely don't know why. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I'm doing here. And while we're at it, let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your part of the world. I love seeing who's up with me, especially if you're tuning in from one of these mysterious places. Now turn off the lights. Maybe turn on the fan for some soothing noise, and let's get started on tonight's journey together. From a misty hill in Indonesia, where ancient stones rise from the earth like old memories, we begin with one of the world's most controversial archaeological sites. They say it could be 2,000 years old, or 20,000. They say it's a temple, or a volcano, and it might just be the oldest man-made structure ever discovered. But whatever it is, you're standing on top of it, and it's still alive. You're standing on a mountaintop in Indonesia. Well, not a mountain exactly, more like a hill covered in a thick pelt of grass and shaded by tall, sleepy trees. From a distance, it looks like any other hill. Maybe you'd pass it by thinking it was just part of the landscape. But then you notice the stones. They poke up like broken teeth, black and hexagonal, stacked into narrow terraces that ring the hill like an ancient spiral staircase. You reach down and touch one cool, hard smooth along the edge, and you realize something strange. These aren't scattered randomly. They're arranged, deliberately, almost architecturally. Welcome to Gunung Padang. The name means Mountain of Enlightenment, which, depending on how much coffee you've had today, is either inspiring or deeply suspicious. And right now, with the mist rolling in over the trees and the soft rumble of volcanic soil beneath your feet, it feels more like the latter. Gunung Padang has been known to locals for centuries. Long before archaeologists showed up, villagers believed it was a sacred place. A place where kings prayed, gods were honored, and maybe, just maybe, something older slumbered below. For years, researchers assumed it was a typical megalithic site maybe 2 or 3,000 years old, give or take a dynasty. Neat, but not world-shattering. And then someone brought a radar. In 2011, scientists started probing the hill with ground-penetrating scans, expecting to find little more than weathered stone piles. What they found instead were chambers, layers, walls hidden beneath walls, hardened zones of compacted material that looked, well, let's say, suspiciously man-made. Imagine peeling back the earth like an onion and discovering that each layer contains a different blueprint, a different chapter, one that goes deeper and deeper in time until you reach something that shouldn't exist at all. Some of the deepest carbon-dated material suggested an age between $13,000 and 20,000 years. For reference, the Great Pyramid of Giza is around 4,500 years old. Gobekli Tepe, previously considered the oldest known megalithic site clocks, in at 11,600 years. So if the data's correct, Gunung Padang isn't just old, it's ancient in a way that flips the whole human timeline on its head. Of course, not everyone buys it. There's plenty of skepticism, and rightly so. Dating organic material near stones doesn't prove the stones were placed by humans, and natural formations can mimic intentional structures. Columnar basalt, for instance, can fracture into neat vertical blocks that almost look machined. And some geologists argue that's exactly what we're seeing here, a weird but natural rock formation dressed up by folklore and wishful thinking. But here's the thing, even skeptics admit that parts of the site seem off. The terraces aren't random. The stones form rectangles, walls, and even staircases. There's alignment, pattern, a sense of design. And that's not something volcanic activity tends to do unless the Earth suddenly picked up a hobby in architectural feng shui. Then there's the layout. Gunung Padang isn't just one uniform platform. It's built in layers like a cake that's been re-iced several times. And each layer seems to be from a different era. Some stones appear older, buried beneath newer ones. It's as if different cultures kept returning to the hill, adding their own chapters, rebuilding over ruins they couldn't fully understand. So, who built it? Well, we don't know. And that's the part that makes your skin itch. If Gunung Padang is really 20,000 years old, it would mean an advanced culture existed during the last ice age, capable of shaping stone organizing labor and performing astronomical alignments. That's not supposed to happen. According to the traditional narrative, humans were still hunter-gatherers, then surviving on berries, chasing mammoths, and most definitely not laying out sacred geometry on volcanic hillsides. So either the dates are wrong, or the story of human civilization is missing a few volumes. Naturally, this has attracted all kinds of theories. Some suggest Gunung Padang was a temple of immense spiritual significance. Others think it was a library, each stone a coded message, each terrace a different frequency of thought. And of course, there are whispers of lost civilizations. Atlantis, Lemuria, you know the drill. Then there's the really fun theory that Gunung Padang was never meant to be above ground at all. That it's a kind of tomb or vault sealed by time, a box waiting to be opened. Excavations have been frustratingly slow. Bureaucracy, funding issues, and academic infighting have kept large-scale digs from proceeding. Most of what we know comes from scans, core samples, and a lot of extrapolation. And that means the truth is still buried, maybe just a few feet below your boots. You walk a little farther up the hill, stepping over mossy stones. There's a quiet here, the kind that feels older than sound, the kind that gets into your teeth. What if there was a civilization before all the others? One wiped out by disaster, swallowed by time, and remembered only as myth? What if the stories of flood gods and sky people and fallen stars aren't fiction, but fossilized memory? Historians still debate whether the deeper layers of Gunung Padang are really man-made, or whether we're just seeing what we want to see. But even if the deepest dates don't hold up, the site still forces questions. Why this hill? Why this shape? Why this obsessive alignment? And why, after all these years, is no one in a hurry to find out? As the mist curls around your feet and the stones begin to blur into shadow, you start to understand. Gunung Padang isn't just a site, it's a question. One carved in stone and left half-answered. A whisper from a world that may have vanished before ours even began. And if it's asking something, are we ready to listen? The surface world fades as you step down into the earth. The air cools. The walls close in. And your footsteps echo through rock that hasn't seen sunlight in centuries. You're not in a basement. You're not even in a cave. You're inside a city, one that was hidden for thousands of years beneath the soil of central Turkey, and only discovered when a man decided to knock out a wall in his home. He was renovating as the story goes. Harmless, domestic stuff. Maybe he wanted a wine cellar or just a little more room. But behind that wall, a tunnel, a passage. And that passage led to another, and another, and another. Welcome to Derinkuyu. From the outside, the town is forgettable. Just a small Anatolian village with dusty streets, low buildings, and little to suggest that something utterly impossible lies underneath. But descend through one of the public entrances today, and you'll find a sprawling subterranean labyrinth, an ancient underground city carved directly into volcanic rock. Not just a few rooms or shelters. We're talking about an entire multi-level metropolis that once held up to 20,000 people. Yes, you read that right, 20,000. Derinkuyu isn't just deep, it's organized. The city extends at least 18 levels down and 250 feet below the surface, though some suspect more lie hidden. Inside you'll find stables, kitchens, storage rooms, wells, schools, wineries, churches and living quarters. There are ventilation shafts, trapdoors, and massive circular stones that roll into place to seal off entrances. There are escape tunnels connecting it to other underground complexes miles away. It's not a cave, it's a fortress. And it was built to last. Mainstream archaeology dates the first levels of Derinkuyu to around the 8th or 7th century BCE, likely constructed by the Phrygians or Hittites. Later, early Christians fleeing Roman persecution expanded and used it as a hidden refuge. Some even say it was used during the Arab-Byzantine Wars. Over time, it became part of a network of over 200 underground cities across the Cappadocia region. Sounds tidy, right? A historical anomaly, but explainable. Early people hiding from invaders. Logical. Sensible. But here's the thing. The deeper you go, the stranger it gets. The architecture becomes cruder. The air feels heavier. The lower chambers seem older, less refined, more worn. As if the further you descend, the closer you get to something primeval, something prehistorically practical or possibly sacred. There's no consensus on why anyone would build something this vast underground. Defense makes sense, sure. You can hide from soldiers, animals, even weather. But live there for months. Breathe stale air, store food, raise children, hold religious ceremonies, all without natural light. Why go that deep? Some researchers propose that the earliest builders weren't hiding from armies, but from the environment. Maybe they were sheltering from extreme weather, volcanic eruptions, blizzards, or even the aftershocks of the Ice Age. Others suggest solar flares or cosmic radiation. Some point to legends that speak of giants and monsters roaming the earth, forcing people to flee beneath it. Historians still debate whether Derinkuyu was originally a defensive city, a climate refuge, or something else entirely. Then, of course, there are the more speculative theories. Some claim Derinkuyu is far older than the 8th century BCE, perhaps by thousands of years. A leftover from an unknown civilization that predated the Hittites, maybe even predating written history. Others go further, arguing it was not built with primitive tools, but inherited and expanded by later cultures who didn't understand its original function. And a few whisper the wildest theory of all, that Derinkuyu wasn't built by us. At least not us, as we understand ourselves. Let's slow down for a moment. The volcanic tuff that makes up Cappadocia's soft rock is relatively easy to dig. But carving out tunnels large enough to hold tens of thousands of people, without collapsing, without modern tools, and with working ventilation across multiple vertical levels. That's not a weekend project. That's not a desperate survival scramble. That's infrastructure planning. And yet we've never found blueprints, no instructions, no written records of who built it or why. Not even graffiti. You walk deeper. The corridors become tighter. You have to duck. The stone is cool against your fingertips. In some areas, the lighting changes the way sound behaves. A whisper carries. A cough disappears. Could that be by accident? Or was it tuned that way? Some of the circular stone doors, by the way, weigh hundreds of pounds. They pivot perfectly in their carved slots. One person can roll them into place from the inside, but once shut, there's no way to push them open from the outside. That's not a panic room. That's a plan. And then there are the wells. Deep vertical shafts providing fresh water from underground sources, some of them sealed from above. Why? To prevent poisoning from invaders on the surface, to allow for isolated survival. Historians still debate whether the full size of Derinkuyu has even been revealed. Only a portion is open to the public. Other areas remain sealed off, unexplored. Some say it connects to other cities, like Keimakli, via miles-long tunnels. Others believe even deeper levels exist, but are too dangerous to reach. And there's one more thing, something nobody talks about. The legends. Local stories speak of creatures in the dark, of tunnels that wind on, endlessly leading to places no map has ever captured, of whispers that echo even when no one speaks. These are tales passed down quietly, not written in guidebooks. Not confirmed, not denied. You pause at the bottom level. It's silent here. Thick pressure, cooked silence. You imagine living down here for weeks, months. The lamps flickering, the air dry and still. Children learning to walk without ever seeing the sun. You think of the people who built this, who planned it, who passed through these halls without ever knowing we'd one day stumble back into them. Derinkuyu is a question carved in reverse, a city not built up, but down. A place meant to disappear from view, from memory, from history. And somehow, that's exactly what it did. Until someone knocked down a wall and fell through a crack in time. You've left the quiet earth of Anatolia behind, swapped for the staggering heights of the Bolivian Andes. The air is thin up here. Not I need a break thin more. Like why are my lungs confused thin? At over 12,000 feet above sea level, your body hums with altitude. and the landscape stretches out in every direction, like the bones of a forgotten world. But you're not here for the view. You're here for the stones. Puma Punku doesn't look like much when you first see it. There are no towering pyramids, no photogenic temples, no polite ropes or gift shops, just scattered stone blocks, massive ones strewn across the plateau like someone was building a city and then rage quit halfway through. But as you get closer, something shifts. These stones aren't random. They're shaped, cut, measured. They have grooves and slots and perfect 90-degree corners. They weren't just dropped here, they were placed, or were meant to be. And then something went wrong, or something stopped. The name Puma Punku means door of the puma in the Aymara language, and whether that refers to a literal puma or some cosmic passage, no one's entirely sure. What we do know is that this place wasn't designed with crude tools or guesswork. The stones, some over 100 tons, are cut so precisely that even modern engineers pause. The famous H-blocks, for example, are symmetrical, modular, and stackable like giant, impossibly heavy Lego pieces. Run your fingers along one, and you'll feel edges so sharp they could split your fingernail. Grooves cut with machine-like precision. Drill holes of perfect depth and diameter spaced evenly in ways that defy manual carving. The faces of the blocks are flat to within a fraction of a millimeter more precise than what we usually credit to pre-industrial civilizations. Mainstream archaeology tells us that Puma Punku was built by the Tiwanaku culture, which flourished in the region from roughly 200 to 1000 AD. And the Tiwanaku were impressive. They built advanced irrigation systems, practiced complex agriculture, and had a vast ceremonial city just next door. But here's the catch: even within that remarkable culture, Puma Punku stands out. The stonework here doesn't just look different, it feels different. You begin to wonder, was this built by the Tiwanaku from scratch? Or did they inherit it, repurpose it, try to finish a project left behind by someone else? Historians still debate whether the site was a solar observatory, a temple, a fortress, or all three. Its alignment with celestial bodies is too precise to be a coincidence. Some believe it marked solstices or planetary movements acting as an ancient calendar. Others suggest the layout matches cosmic symbolism found in Tiwanaku mythology, a sacred narrative carved into stone. But then there are those oddities. For instance, the red sandstone used at the site was quarried from 10 kilometers away. That's no easy feat when you're dragging blocks the size of shipping containers. The andesite, the harder, grayer stone used for the precision-cut pieces, came from even farther. Moving them across rugged terrain without wheels or iron tools. That's not just labor. That's logistics, and no one seems to agree on how it was done. Theories abound: wooden rollers, llama-powered sledges, teams of thousands dragging ropes across custom-built ramps. All plausible in isolation. But again and again the question circles back, not just to how the stones were moved, but how they were cut. Because chiseling stone is one thing. Carving perfect smooth channels and interlocking notches into granite-hard andesite is something else entirely. You'd need tools harder than the stone itself, diamond, or high-grade steel, or something else. Some fringe theorists suggest the stones were softened using plant-based compounds, creating a kind of malleable stone paste shaped like clay and hardened afterward. Others point to possible lost technologies, sonic cutting vibrational tools, or even geopolymer casting, where the blocks were molded rather than quarried. And of course, the wildest theories float like the Andean wind extraterrestrial engineers, ancient Atlanteans, or an advanced pre-flood civilization whose blueprints were washed away when the last ice age ended. Skeptical. You should be. And yet, you're standing in front of stones that modern stonemasons can't easily replicate using hand tools. That's not fantasy, that's fact. And here's something else. Many of the blocks at Puma Punku seem like they were designed to fit together, but now lie scattered, unfinished, abandoned. Were they destroyed? By earthquake? By invaders? Or did the builders simply leave mid-construction, never to return? You crouch beside one of the H blocks and trace the groove where another would have slid in, locked like a keystone. You imagine the hands that shaped this, hundreds of them, dozens one person, with knowledge long since lost. Historians still debate whether the site is an unfinished masterpiece or the ruins of something once complete and later dismantled. Either way, the silence here speaks volumes. There's also the location to consider. At this altitude, agriculture is difficult, resources are scarce, and construction is punishing. So why build such a monument here on this exposed, wind-scrubbed plateau? Some say the placement was sacred, that the site is aligned with energy lines, or that it serves as a spiritual gateway. Others believe the site was part of a much larger ceremonial complex, one that linked the heavens and the underworld, with Puma Punku at the threshold. Then there's the destruction itself. The site didn't just collapse. The stones were scattered, torn, as if something or someone wanted to erase it, but not completely. Enough remains to intrigue, to whisper, to confuse. You walk slowly through the site as the Andean sun begins to dip behind jagged peaks. The light casts long shadows across the blocks. They look less like debris now, and more like parts of a giant machine. A puzzle. Something waiting to be put back together. Historians still debate whether Puma Punku was a place of worship or a technological center, a cosmic map, or a message from a lost people. But you can feel it beneath your feet, in the stone, in the wind. Something important happened here, and we no longer remember what. The road winds upward through the Thar Desert, twisting around craggy hills and sandstone ridges until finally, like a mirage punched out of the horizon, you see it. Mehrangarh Fort. It doesn't rise gently from the rock. It erupts. Towering walls surge nearly 400 feet above the city of Jodhpur, each stone a shade of sun-baked copper. At sunset, the whole thing glows like a slow-motion explosion. But as you get closer, that burnished glow gives way to something else, something colder, older. A silence that clings to the fort like dust in a forgotten room. You're not just walking into a stronghold, you're walking into a question. Mehrangarh was officially founded in the mid-15th century by Rao Jodha, a Rajput king. But the stories that surround it, quiet, persistent, and a little unsettling, go back further. Maybe much further. They say the hill once belonged to a hermit named Chirya Nathji. He lived alone, surrounded by birds, until the day Rao Jodha's men came to clear the land. The hermit cursed them, swore the fort would always suffer from a lack of water. And to this day, water scarcity plagues the region. Coincidence? Maybe. But then there's the part about the man buried alive. According to legend, to lift the curse and sanctify the foundations, a man named Rajaram Meghwal agreed to be entombed within the walls of the fort. A human sacrifice, not in battle, but in brick and mortar. He was buried standing up, so his spirit would support the structure forever. And that's not just a story. There's a shrine to him inside the fort. You pass through massive gates studded with spikes once used to repel war elephants. Deep gouges mar one of the doors where cannon fire struck centuries ago. But walk a little further, and things get stranger. The architecture shifts. Inside the fortress walls are palaces, temples, and courtyards carved with dizzying intricacy. Latticed windows, acoustic arches, cooling vents that defy desert heat. The kind of engineering that shouldn't exist in a time before air conditioning or CAD software. One chamber, the Zenana Diodi, was designed so royal women could see out without being seen. But the placement of vents and lattice work also kept the rooms cool funneled air and carried whispers from one end of the room to the other. You say something softly and hear it travel. Unbroken. Echoed back from across the sandstone. Accidental or intentional? Historians still debate whether these architectural features were simply practical innovations or evidence of a deeper design philosophy rooted in sound space and sacred geometry. Step outside and you'll see the battlements lined with cannons. British, Portuguese, Persian, all acquired over centuries of conflict. But beneath the battle scars, older features remain. Tunnels lead downward into the stone, some ending in storage chambers, others in dead ends, or what look like dead ends. Some are still sealed, others open into darkness. The story goes that some of these tunnels lead far beneath the fort, possibly to chambers built atop even older structures. Or beneath them, excavations have revealed underground stepwells, geometrically precise structures dug deep into the earth to store water in the dry season. Some are carved in tiers with perfect angles and aligned steps that track solar shadows across the year. Was this just water management or something more? Historians still debate whether the fort was built from the mountain or into it. And here's where things start to get uncomfortable. Some of the foundations don't match the upper architecture. The lower blocks, thick weathered, precisely laid, seem older, heavier, less ornamental. It's as if the Rajputs built upon a skeleton that was already there, inheriting the bones of a structure they didn't fully understand. This is a pattern if you've been paying attention. A fortress built atop a previous one, a new crown atop an ancient skull. And then there are the scars. Several of the stone gates have deep symmetrical indentations, battle damage, we're told. But some of the patterns don't quite match known weapons. They're too clean, too uniform, as if something struck, not with brute force, but surgical intent. You run your hand over one such mark. It feels deliberate. Historians still debate whether these were made by cannons or by something else, something no longer in use or no longer remembered. Walk into the museum gallery and you'll find delicate weaponry, miniature paintings, finely wrought armor. But what's missing is just as loud. There's no record of how the earliest stones were laid. No blueprint, no reference. Just a fort that appeared aged, fought over, and endured. And it has endured. Mehrangarh was never fully conquered. It withstood countless sieges. It was built, some say, with such symmetry and spiritual precision that it repelled invaders by design, not just with force, but with harmony. It was protected by its own resonance. That may sound poetic. But in places like this, poetry feels like fact. As you step onto the ramparts and gaze out across the blue city of Jodhpur, the view is breathtaking, like looking out from the eye of an ancient god. The houses below stretch like waves, rooftops painted in indigo to reflect heat, and some say to honor Lord Shiva. But up here, the wind doesn't carry the sounds of the city. It carries something older. You can almost hear the scratch of chisel on stone, the quiet breath of rituals, long forgotten, the final heartbeat of a man buried in the wall to hold the sky at bay. Mehrangarh is a fortress, but it is also a memory of precision, of pain, of power passed from hand to hand, age to age, stone to stone. Historians still debate whether the fort's deepest secrets are architectural, spiritual, or mythological. But you already know the answer, don't you? They're all three, and maybe the real reason this place has endured for over 5 centuries is that someone long before Rao Yoda built something here that was never meant to fall. The wind here doesn't whisper, it howls. You're standing on a ridge in the rugged, arid wilds of southern Pakistan, where the Hingol National Park bleeds into the Makran coast, where jagged hills rise like fossilized waves under an endless, dust-colored sky. And in the distance, jutting from a sandstone cliff, like some half-forgotten sentinel, you see it, the Balochistan Sphinx. At first glance, you think it's just a rock, a large, weather-worn hunk of stone. No big deal. But then you blink, you tilt your head, and suddenly, it's staring back. The profile is uncanny. A long, squared headdress, an angled jawline, a noble feline face gazing out over the plain with an expression so eerily familiar it stops you cold. If you've ever seen the Great Sphinx of Giza, your brain starts doing backflips, because this thing, it looks just like it. It's not subtle. The formation has been dubbed the Balochistan Sphinx by observers who argue that nature doesn't sculpt this way, at least not often, and certainly not with such symmetry. From certain angles, the resemblance is nearly photographic. The seated pose, the elevated platform-like base, the sloping shoulders carved right into the cliff. It even appears to wear a crown-like ridge, like the Neem's headdress worn by pharaohs of old. Geologists are quick to weigh in here. They'll tell you this is just pareidolia, our human habit of seeing faces in clouds, cliffs, or electrical outlets. The Hingol area is full of strange erosional features. Wind and water have carved out all kinds of surreal forms, mushroom-shaped outcrops, pillars that look like towers, even one dubbed the Princess of Hope. The Sphinx, they say, is just one more rock with good PR. Maybe. But you crouch near the base of the formation, and something nags at you. Those straight edges. That base structure. From the side, it almost appears to rest on a stylobate, a kind of stepped platform common in ancient architecture. And some researchers claim that surrounding it are further signs of design, rectilinear lines, possible stairways, structures that hint at temples, chambers, or even collapsed columns. The arguments are polarizing. Mainstream archaeology shrugs. There's been no official excavation, no ground-penetrating radar, no sanctioned surveys. It's just too remote, too politically unstable, too far off the academic radar. So the formation sits here baking in the sun, untested and unresolved. And yet, those who visit often report the same thing of feeling. That sense of deliberate form. That same ancient unease you feel when walking through ruins that were never meant to be completely understood. Some theories, unorthodox but intriguing, suggest that the Balochistan Sphinx may be a remnant of a long-lost coastal civilization, one that once hugged the shores of the Arabian Sea back when sea levels were lower and the climate more forgiving. If so, it would be older than the Indus Valley cities inland, older than Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa. That would make it very, very old. Others go further. They point to similarities in design between the Egyptian Sphinx and this one. The broad jaw, the headdress, the sense of timeless watchfulness. Could there have been a cultural link, a shared architectural motif passed across continents long before we think it was possible? Historians still debate whether civilizations like those of ancient Egypt's Sumer and the Indus Valley rose independently, or whether they sprang from a common ancestor now lost to the sea, the sands, or the ages. The idea of a global prehistoric culture isn't new. It's just controversial, unprovable, and frankly difficult to swallow. But look again, the erosion patterns don't explain everything. Nature does many wondrous things, but it doesn't usually carve right angles or symmetrical shoulders or pedestal bases. And if the features were natural, why do they appear so consistently human? Then comes the awkward part. Why has this formation been so thoroughly ignored? In an era where almost every ruin gets a drone scan, a TikTok video, and a Netflix documentary, the Balochistan Sphinx remains almost completely unstudied. No major geological teams, no UNESCO attention, no protective barriers. It sits eroding slowly, as if everyone has agreed to collectively pretend it doesn't exist. One possible reason it exists in a gray area, it's just plausible enough to be meaningful, and just ambiguous enough to be dismissed. But you're here now, and the sun is dipping lower on the horizon, casting shadows across the Sphinx's stony features. The shape sharpens, its silhouette looms larger, and you get the strange sense that it's not just a coincidence, that maybe you're not the first person to stand here and feel like they've just brushed against the veil of something forgotten. No tools have been found nearby, no inscriptions, no skeletal remains, no artifacts that say, yes, this was carved by human hands. But that absence feels louder than presence, like an erased chalkboard, like something that was deliberately left blank. Maybe that's the real mystery, not what the Sphinx is, but why no one seems to want to know. Some say it's a distraction, a hoax. Others call it sacred, a marker, a warning, a watchman. But you're not here for the answers. You're here for the question. And that question echoes through the canyon air long after you've left. What if this wasn't made by erosion, but by memory? A memory older than civilization. A memory carved in stone and buried not in sand, but in silence. As the sky darkens and the stars begin to press through the velvet dusk, you take one last look back. And the Sphinx, if that's what it is, doesn't move. It simply watches, as it always has. You're in Northern California now, among towering pine trees and quiet roads that twist through volcanic foothills. The air is crisp. The forest is still. And above everything rising like a story that refuses to end is Mount Shasta. From a geological standpoint, Mount Shasta is a stratovolcano, tall, snow-capped, and dramatic. It hasn't erupted in centuries, but scientists say it could again. Still, that's not why people talk about it. Mount Shasta's mystery isn't rooted in lava or tectonics. It's what lies beneath. If you listen to local legends, this mountain isn't just sacred. It's inhabited, not by bears or miners or seasonal hikers, but by something stranger. Something less visible. You start to hear about it in whispers. The stories sound ridiculous at first, the kind of fringe fantasy that gets laughed out of classrooms and forums alike. And yet the people who tell them do so with unnerving sincerity. Not I read this online sincerity. More like I saw it with my own eyes, and I still can't explain its sincerity. They talk about Lemurians. The tale goes like this: long ago, before recorded time, there was a great continent in the Pacific Ocean called Lemuria. It was home to a highly advanced civilization, spiritual enlightened masters of crystal energy and forgotten sciences. Then, like Atlantis, it sank beneath the sea in a cataclysmic event. But some Lemurians survived, and they came here to Mount Shasta. Why this place? Who knows? Maybe the energy, maybe the altitude, maybe the way it stands alone, commanding the landscape like a monument to something half-remembered. The Lemurians are said to have built a city deep inside the mountain called Telos. It's a hidden realm of marble halls, glowing crystals, and golden light. And while that might sound like a rejected script from a 70s sci-fi movie, the belief persists. Because people keep seeing things, strange lights, glowing doorways, figures robed in white, tall and silent, disappearing into trees, or walking straight through rock. Some hikers claim to have found cave entrances that weren't there when they returned. Others report hearing low-frequency hums in the forest vibrations they could feel more than hear. Even park rangers have shared odd encounters, shadows that move without cause, voices in the wind, footprints that lead nowhere. Historians still debate whether these legends stem from indigenous stories, 19th century mystics, or Cold War-era paranoia. But they're hard to dismiss outright when so many unrelated people report such similar things. The earliest written account of this intermountain world comes from an 1899 book called A Dweller on Two Planets by Frederick Spencer Oliver. According to Oliver, he didn't write the book so much as channel it telepathically from a being who lived inside Mount Shasta. That being described life in Telos, its laws, its energy sources, its connection to ancient wisdom. The idea caught fire in certain spiritual circles. Over time, it grew mutated and embedded itself in American esoteric lore. Of course, most people roll their eyes. No one has found an entrance. No one has brought back photographs or relics from this inner world. There's no proof, only anecdotes. And in the world of empirical truth, anecdotes aren't enough. But even skeptics admit there's something about Mount Shasta. It's not just the Lemurians. Native American tribes like the Modoc and Wintu considered it sacred long before white settlers arrived. They believed the mountain was the home of powerful spirits, beings of the sky who watched over the land. To them, the peak was a bridge between worlds, a place where heaven touched earth, where visions came more easily and the veil between realities wore thin. You don't have to believe in lost civilizations to feel that. Even now, standing at the tree line, you sense the mountain's presence. It's quiet, but not empty. The air buzzes, not loud, but persistent. You feel like you're being watched, not with malice, but with curiosity, as though something old is wondering whether you're ready to remember. Then there's the geology. Mount Shasta is riddled with lava tubes and underground caverns, most of them unexplored. That's a fact. Some are large enough to walk through, others partially collapsed or flooded. It's not hard to imagine that over time, local stories of underground chambers could be born from such formations, especially if you're already inclined to believe they were built, not formed. And there's one more wrinkle. Mount Shasta sits along what many spiritual traditions call an energy vortex, a place where Earth's magnetic fields are said to converge, intensify, and spiral. These vortexes, believers say, can heighten awareness, stir visions, or even bend reality. Sedona has one. So does Glastonbury. Shasta's vortex is considered one of the strongest. Now, scientifically, vortex energy doesn't hold much water. But the experience people describe, tingling skin time dilation, emotional surges, is very real to them. Whether it's electromagnetic, geological, psychological, or something else entirely. Well, historians still debate that. You hike a little higher. The trees thin. The wind rises. Somewhere behind you, a branch cracks, but no one's there. And you wonder, what if there is something beneath your feet? A memory, perhaps, of a civilization that never made it into textbooks, of a culture that didn't leave behind stone monuments or metal tools, but echoes, stories, glimpses caught in the corner of the eye, a soft blue light between the trees that disappears before you can focus. Or maybe that's all this ever was, a mountain, a myth, a mirror. Mount Shasta reflects back what you bring to it. Skepticism, wonder, fear, hope. It doesn't argue. It doesn't explain. It simply stands and watches from summit to shadow, from story to silence. And perhaps that's why the legends won't die. Because deep down, we all sense that somewhere hidden beneath rock and root and time, there's a door waiting to open. Maybe not to Lemuria, but to something we've forgotten how to name. You're back in India now, but not in a crowded bazaar or a bustling city street. You're in Thiruvananthapuram, the quiet capital of Kerala, where palm trees sway in the humidity and the scent of temple incense clings to the air. The temple before you isn't just sacred, it's sealed. This is Padmanabhaswamy Temple. Dedicated to Vishnu in his cosmic reclining form, the temple is a staggering display of devotion and opulence. Towers bristle with carvings, courtyards echo with footsteps and centuries of prayer. Inside, a statue of Vishnu rests on the serpent Ananta, calm and unshaken, as if time itself were his blanket. But for all its grandeur, it's not the deity that draws the world's attention. It's the doors. In 2011, after a legal dispute between the royal family and the state, the Supreme Court of India ordered an inventory of the temple's long-rumored underground vaults. What they found behind those ancient doors stunned even the most skeptical observers. Gold. Literally tons of it. Statues, coins, crowns, ceremonial jewelry, solid gold thrones, ancient weapons encrusted in gems, treasures sealed away for centuries, possibly even longer, just sitting there in the dark, untouched, uncounted. Estimates put the total value in the tens of billions, maybe more, but that was just 5 of the 6 known vaults. The 6th Vault B remains unopened, and that's where the story tilts from the merely astonishing to the truly strange. Vault B isn't locked in the usual way. There's no keyhole, no handle, just a thick iron door that seems fused to the temple itself. Legends say it's protected by powerful mantras, sacred sound vibrations that can only be activated by a high-level spiritual adept, a Siddhapurusha as they call it. And if anyone tries to force it open, catastrophe will follow. Now, in most cases, that would be written off as folklore, just colorful myth. Except this time, people listened. Attempts to open Vault B were met with immediate resistance, not just from religious authorities, but from the public. Protests erupted. Priests warned of curses, earthquakes, even death. The royal family refused to give consent. Government agencies backed off. And so the door remains shut. Historians still debate whether the vault is filled with even more treasure-sacred relics, or perhaps ancient texts, ones that might alter the story of Indian civilization itself. Others think it may be empty, a decoy, a legend inflated over centuries of whispered awe. But then there are those who believe something else entirely. that Vault B is not a vault at all, that it's a containment. According to temple lore, the door is guarded by serpents, not metaphorical ones, but astral beings, Nagas, protectors of cosmic secrets. It's said that the vault seals not wealth, but power, an energy too vast, too volatile, or too sacred to be unleashed. Some esoteric traditions claim the door leads to a chamber designed to house divine frequencies, ones that could alter consciousness, disrupt balance, or even fracture dimensions if improperly accessed. Others suggest it holds an ancient relic not meant for modern eyes, a weapon, a map, a record of pre-human history. Sound far-fetched, sure, but the point remains, nobody is willing to find out. In an age obsessed with transparency and exploration, Vault B is one of the last great secrets humanity seems content to leave alone, and that silence is deafening. You stand near the sanctum's edge, where only a few are allowed. The stone beneath your feet is cool and smooth, worn by centuries of barefoot pilgrims. You can almost feel the weight of what's below you, not just gold or legend, but expectation. You imagine the final door sealed with carvings, staring back at the world like a dare. Open me, but no one does. Why? It's not like we haven't opened other tombs. We've cracked the pyramids, excavated buried cities, even sent drones into lost Mayan tunnels. But here, in a modern country, in a living, breathing temple, sits a door everyone is afraid to open. Not because of traps, but because of faith. That's the strange gravity of Vault B. It sits at the crossroads of belief and curiosity. A place where myth still holds power, where the stories of the past can still overrule the instruments of the present. Historians still debate whether the vault's guardians are acting out of superstition or wisdom. Because maybe, just maybe, some doors were never meant to be opened. And that in itself might be the lesson. What if the ancients weren't hiding treasure? What if they were hiding truth, or more accurately preserving it, holding it back until the world was ready to receive it? Until we were mature enough to interpret it not as greed, but as guidance. You step back into the courtyard sunlight, dappling through temple spires. The chants drift through the air like incense. Life goes on around the unopened vault. Devotees pray, children laugh, flowers are offered. The world turns, but deep below, in the silent heart of the temple, that iron door still waits, not watching, not whispering, just waiting. And maybe that's the real secret, not what lies behind the vault, but why we still choose to let it stay sealed. There's no grand entrance, no towering gateway, just a dusty trail that winds through the highlands of Ethiopia, past goat paths and sun-baked stones, until you find yourself looking down into the earth. Not up-down, because here in the ancient town of Lalibela, the sacred was carved not toward the heavens, but into the ground. Welcome to the rock-hewn churches of Lalibela. They don't rise, they descend. Entire cathedrals carved from a single block of volcanic tuff, each chiseled by hand downward from the Earth's surface like massive architectural negatives. The most famous, Beta Georgis, or the Church of St. George, forms a perfect cruciform, its roof level with the ground, its body sunken deep into the bedrock. From above, it looks like someone stamped a cross into the earth. From below, it feels like you're walking into a secret one etched, not built. And there are 11 of them. 11 churches interconnected by narrow tunnels and trenches, all carved out of solid rock. No bricks, no scaffolding, no external framework, just hammer chisel and faith. Mainstream archaeology dates the churches to the late 12th or early 13th century during the reign of King Lalibela. According to Ethiopian tradition, the king was divinely inspired to build a new Jerusalem after Muslim conquests made pilgrimage to the Holy Land impossible. Angels, the stories say, helped with construction, doubling the workforce each night, making what should have taken centuries into a miracle of decades. Poetic, absolutely. But as you run your fingers along the walls of Beit Medhain, the largest of the churches said to be the largest monolithic structure of its kind in the world, you begin to understand why the legends endure. The pillars inside rise like stone trees, perfectly aligned, impossibly smooth. The symmetry isn't approximate, it's intentional. The interiors are cool, dark, and quiet, except for the occasional echo of chanting, the rustle of robes, the scrape of sandal on stone. But how did they do it? That question hovers over everything here, because unlike conventional construction, there's no margin for error. Carve too deep, chip the wrong way, and the entire structure could collapse. And yet the churches stand harmonious in their proportions, balanced in their orientation, and rich with religious symbolism, none of it accidental. Historians still debate whether the construction was truly finished in one king's lifetime. Some believe the project spanned multiple generations, with successive monarchs continuing Lalibela's vision. Others suspect the site predates his reign entirely, that older, cruder structures were already here, and Lalibela's team refined or repurposed them. Then there are the theories that go much deeper. Some researchers suggest that the rock-cut architecture of Lalibela didn't evolve in isolation. They see echoes of Petra in Jordan, of Ajanta and Ellora in India, even of the Cappadocian cave churches in Turkey. Could there have been an ancient architectural tradition, now forgotten, that specialized not in building up, but in carving down? The similarities are hard to ignore. The subtractive method, the use of soft volcanic stone, the hidden chambers, water channels, symbolic alignments, and the sheer scale accomplished somehow without modern lighting measurement tools or heavy equipment. And then there's the geometry. The layout of the Lalibela complex appears to follow a sacred plan. Some churches are arranged in groups symbolizing concepts like the Trinity. Underground channels connect them, forming symbolic rivers. Trenches represent paths of pilgrimage. The churches are aligned not only in space, but in theology. You step into one of the smaller chapels. Incense curls upward like memory. A priest reads scripture in Ge'ez, the liturgical language of Ethiopian Orthodoxy, his voice echoing through corridors carved centuries ago. He holds a cross ornate hand-forged, passed down through generations. There are no pews, no stained glass, just the sound of prayer and the feel of carved faith all around you. Then you notice something else. There are almost no records, no written blueprints, no surviving plans or engineering notes. The builders left no manuals, no diaries, no diagrams etched into the walls saying, "Here's how we did this." It just exists, and that silence opens the door to even more speculation. Some believe the churches encode ancient knowledge, numerical patterns, symbolic star maps, or forgotten forms of spiritual resonance. Others suggest that Lalibela is only the visible part of a much larger structure, one that extends beneath the surface into undiscovered chambers, or into alignment with sacred sites across Ethiopia. And a few whisper that this isn't the beginning of a tradition, but the end of one. That the churches of Lalibela were the final echo of a civilization that once carved sanctuaries across continents, leaving only these few survivors etched in stone. Historians still debate whether these churches were truly as sudden as they seem, or whether they're the inheritors of something far older. And honestly, you feel that weight as you climb the carved staircase back toward daylight, because there's one last thing to consider. Lalibela was never abandoned. Unlike many of the ancient sites in this journey, deserted, forgotten, reclaimed by jungle or sea, these churches are alive, still used, still loved, still filled with footsteps and incense and prayers. And maybe that's the final mystery, not how they were built, but how they've endured. As you step into the daylight and look back at the cross-shaped pit of Bet Georgis, you realize something simple and profound. This place wasn't just made to honor the divine. It was made to contain it, not in marble, not in stained glass, but in stone, carved directly from the earth, shaped not for glory, but for humility. Not to rise above the people, but to be walked through by them, cool, quiet, and eternal. The churches of Lalibela don't just hold history. They are it. The air is thin again. You've climbed high over 12,000 feet above sea level into the jagged spine of the Andes. Around you, the mountains stretch like stone giants, frozen mid-breath. But at your feet, the stones are doing something even more impressive. They fit together perfectly. Welcome to Sacsayhuamán. No, it's not pronounced sexy woman, despite what every tourist t-shirt in Cusco will tell you. It's a Quechua word, likely meaning satisfied falcon. And this is no ordinary ruin. Sacsayhuamán is a fortress or a temple, or both, built by the Inca, or by someone before them. Depends on who you ask. But one thing is certain, the stones here are so large, so precisely carved, and so tightly fitted that they challenge everything we assume about ancient construction. Let's get specific. Some of these blocks are over 125 tons. That's the weight of a blue whale, or about 90 cars stacked together. And yet, they're not just moved into place. They're fitted, each one carved into a polygonal shape, locking into its neighbors like pieces in a cosmic jigsaw puzzle. No mortar, no glue, no room for even a razor blade between the seams. And the corners, they're not square. Many blocks have 12 or more angles. Think about that. Each stone had to be carved not only to its own specifications, but to match the unique contours of every stone around it, top, bottom, side, diagonal. Now imagine doing that with bronze chisels, or stones, or whatever tools the Inca supposedly used, in high altitude, with no wheels, no written plans. You start to see the problem. Mainstream historians agree that Sacsayhuamán was expanded by the Inca Empire in the 15th century. And they did extraordinary things, roads, aqueducts, terracing architecture that still inspires awe. But many scholars quietly admit that some of the oldest stones, especially the biggest ones, don't match typical Inca style. They're older, worn smoother, weathered deeper, and shaped in a different aesthetic, one less ornamental, more primal. As if whoever started Sacsayhuamán was working with different tools or different knowledge. Historians still debate whether the Inca inherited this site from a prior civilization. Some point to legends of the Kalak, a mysterious pre-Inca people with stone-shaping knowledge that seems to have vanished without a trace. Others reference stories of the Viracocha, godlike beings who taught the Andean people arts and sciences, then disappeared. Whatever the truth, you can feel the age in your bones. And then there's the structure itself. The layout of Sacsayhuamán is zigzagged walls that jut and cut in a way that seems chaotic at first, until you realize they mirror the teeth of a puma. The animal was sacred in Inca cosmology, representing power and strength. Cusco. The Inca capital was said to be laid out in the shape of a puma, and Sacsayhuamán, the head. The fortress temple is part of something bigger. A city, a symbol, a celestial map drawn on the earth. Some researchers even argue that the stones themselves are more than just material, they're vibrationally aligned. That their interlocking design helps dissipate seismic energy during earthquakes. And oddly enough, they're right. Cusco has endured countless earthquakes over the centuries. Spanish buildings crumbled, colonial churches split in half. But the ancient stones of Sacsayhuamán, they didn't budge, not an inch. And that's not luck, that's engineering. Engineering we still can't fully replicate. You walk along the base of the wall, your hand brushing stone so smooth it feels almost artificial. And then you notice something stranger. On many blocks, there are little knobs, rounded protrusions that seem to serve no obvious purpose. They weren't decorative, and they're not random. You've seen similar ones in Egypt, in Turkey, in Peru. Why? Historians still debate whether these knobs were used to lift the stones or whether they're a kind of signature, a remnant of a shared ancient language of stone, a subtle mark left behind by builders long gone. But what if those builders weren't just carving rocks? What if they were softening them? That's one of the more unusual theories, but it persists, especially among local lore. Some say the stones were softened using a plant-based compound, perhaps made from rare jungle herbs, a paste that allowed the blocks to be molded like clay, then hardened in the sun. Others speak of a sound frequency, a resonance that could temporarily liquefy stone at the molecular level. Sound far-fetched, maybe. But then you look at those impossibly interlocking angles, and you start to wonder. Even the Spanish were impressed. After they conquered Cusco, they dismantled part of Sacsayhuamán to build their own churches and palaces, dragging stones downhill to form the foundations of their empire. But the largest blocks, they couldn't move them, so they left them. Which means what we see today, it's just the leftovers. And they're still mind-blowing. At the far end of the site, you find an entrance to a tunnel. It cuts through the hill like a wormhole, cool and damp and whispering. Legend says some of these tunnels connect to other ruins, maybe even to secret chambers beneath Cusco itself. One story claims a golden disc once lay hidden beneath Sacsayhuamán, an artifact of the sun brought down by the gods, hidden before the conquest. No one's found it. But explorers, shamans, and wanderers still come looking. They dream of secret doors, vibrating stones, and knowledge left behind for the day we're ready to use it wisely. You pause at one of the upper terraces, gazing out over the rooftops of Cusco. The city hums below traffic, and commerce, and history rolling forward. But here above it all, the stones remain silent. And yet, you feel like they're watching, not ominously, just waiting. Historians still debate whether Sacsayhuamán is a fortress, a temple, a giant vibration-dampening puma head, or something else entirely. But one thing is clear. Whoever shaped these stones did so with a level of knowledge we're only beginning to rediscover. You place your palm against one of the great blocks. It's cool to the touch, solid, timeless. And as the Andean sun slips behind the hills, you feel that old familiar question stir again. Not just how these walls were built, but why? Why make them so perfect? Why hide the method? And why does it feel like they're still alive? The gravel crunches beneath your feet as you approach a squat coral wall just outside Homestead, Florida. There are no guards, no temples, no signs that say mysterious megastructure ahead. Just an old wooden gate and a hand-painted sign, Coral Castle. You push the gate open. It doesn't creak. It glides. And that's your first clue. Something's off. Inside is a stone wonderland, blocks of limestone, weighing up to 30 tons, sculpted into thrones, obelisks, sundials, crescent-shaped benches, a perfectly balanced 9-ton gate, and even a telescope aligned to the North Star. There are no cranes, no welding seams, no scaffolding, just the work of a man named Edward Leedskalnin. One man, 100 pounds, 5 feet tall, no formal engineering education, and he built the entire thing by himself. That's the story anyway. According to local lore and Ed himself, he moved all the stones alone, mostly at night, using tools he made from scrap metal and old truck parts. No one ever saw him work. People would drive by during the day and see nothing new. Then they'd come back the next morning, and bam, a 10-ton block had shifted 30 feet and now sat on a perfectly leveled base. "How did you do it?" they'd ask. Ed would just smile and say, "I understand the laws of weight and leverage." And that was that. Historians still debate whether Ed was a genius with an intuitive grasp of physics or whether there's more to the story. Let's break this down. The coral blocks, technically eolitic limestone, aren't as hard as granite, but they're still dense. Moving one without machinery is no joke. Ed carved, transported, and balanced over 100 tons of stone over the course of 28 years. No one helped. No one documented how. He had no electricity, no crane, no winch. And yet, he installed a gate so perfectly balanced it could be pushed open with one finger despite weighing more than a city bus. When it eventually stopped turning decades later, engineers tried to fix it. They brought in heavy machinery, took it apart, studied it. Even with modern tools, they couldn't replicate Ed's original balance. The gate never worked as smoothly again. You walk through the sculpture garden and run your hand over one of the chairs. It's rough and weathered, but strangely comfortable, like it was designed for someone who spent a lot of time thinking. There's a throne, a heart-shaped table, a crescent moon fountain, even a model of the solar system, and none of it feels random. It's as if Ed was trying to tell you something, not in words, in geometry, in alignment. Some researchers suggest the layout of Coral Castle encodes sacred geometry, that the positions of the stones form harmonics, that Ed was tapping into natural earth energies, ley lines, magnetic currents, the kind of invisible stuff that ancient builders might have understood better than we do now. Fringe theorists have a field day here. Some believe Ed rediscovered the secrets of the pyramids, how the ancients lifted massive blocks using magnetism resonance or sound. They point to Ed's notebooks, where he wrote cryptic things about magnetic current and the individual North and South Pole magnets inside every atom. Others claim he was using anti-gravity or harnessing the piezoelectric properties of limestone, or channeling Earth's energy grid to temporarily reduce mass. Do these ideas sound wild? Absolutely. Do they explain how a single man could move and balance a 30-ton stone with homemade tripods? Not exactly. But here's what we know. Ed was obsessed with magnetism. He built strange coil devices, left behind bizarre diagrams, talked about magnetic base structures and cosmic energy. And unlike most backyard tinkerers, he did something with that obsession. He built a castle. Oh, and he did it for love. That's the part that gets glossed over sometimes, but it matters. Ed's motivation, according to him, was a woman named Agnes Scuffs, his sweet 16. She broke off their engagement the day before their wedding. Heartbroken Ed left Latvia and came to America. And over the next 3 decades, he carved his heartbreak into coral. Every throne, every dial, every precisely balanced stone was a love letter never sent. Historians still debate whether Sweet 16 ever really existed or whether she was a metaphor. But standing in Coral Castle, you feel her presence in every corner. Even the telescope points toward the North Star, as if Ed were trying to align his broken heart with the cosmos. You pause near the moon fountain, where water used to flow through stone channels shaped like crescents. The air here feels strange, still, like you've stepped into a different kind of physics. Not one of equations, but of intention. And maybe that's the secret. Ed never explained exactly how he did it, but he left clues. He once said, "If you knew the secret of the pyramids, you'd know how I built the castle." He believed the ancient Egyptians used a form of lost science, something to do with balance frequency, maybe magnetism, that made heavy stones light, even fluid. And whether he actually rediscovered that secret or just got really, really good with levers remains unsolved. But Coral Castle remains. Stone doesn't lie, and neither does devotion. You exit through the same gate. You entered the one that still moves more smoothly than it should, and glance back. The moon is rising, casting long shadows across the coral. It doesn't feel like a ruin. It feels like a message, a whisper from one man, carved in silence, that still echoes loud enough to confuse engineers and inspire dreamers almost 100 years later. And maybe that's the real magic. Not the mechanics, but the mystery. You're in the Bolivian highlands now, where the wind rarely rests, and the land stretches wide, like a blank page, waiting for something to be written on it. From the ground, it seems barren, empty, almost boring if you're not the sort who listens closely. But then you rise into the air, maybe by drone or small plane, and the lines begin to appear. Long, thin, straight lines, thousands of them. They crisscross the land in a web of precision, slicing over hills, down ravines, across plateaus. They don't curve, they don't wobble. Some stretch for 10, 20, even 30 kilometers, unwavering. You're looking at the Sajama Lines, and no one knows what they're for. Located in western Bolivia near the towering Sajama volcano, these geoglyphs cover an area estimated at over 22,000 square kilometers. That's bigger than the state of New Jersey. Bigger than some countries. It's often compared to the Nazca Lines, but that's like comparing a garden path to a highway system. The Sajama Lines don't form animals or spirals. They're straight, just straight. But they are everywhere. From above, it looks like someone took a cosmic ruler and dragged it across the landscape again and again. The lines don't mark modern roads or boundaries. They were made by clearing the top layer of dark soil and rock to expose the lighter ground beneath. Simple in theory, monumental in practice. Because here's the kicker, the Sajama Lines weren't created by one person, or even one generation. They were made over centuries, possibly more than 1,000 years, by the Aymara people and their ancestors. Without GPS, without drones, without any aerial perspective. Just walking, dragging, placing stones, clearing brush. And somehow they kept them straight. Historians still debate how that was possible. Try walking in a straight line for a mile without drifting. Now try 10 miles, over uneven terrain, through hills and valleys. Now imagine doing it so accurately that the line is still visible from space. And then imagine thousands of those lines perfectly straight and intersecting like a sacred geometry workbook scattered across the desert. Theories swirl like mountain wind, Some say the lines were ritual paths, routes for religious processions, possibly connecting sacred shrines called wakas, or leading to mountains believed to be deities. Others think they served practical purposes, marking territories, agricultural zones, or travel routes. A few suggest they align with celestial events tracking the sun's journey, or the position of stars important to the Aymara cosmology. And then there are those who think the lines are messages, not words, but meanings, not sentences, but structures. A way to inscribe spiritual or cosmic order into the very bones of the earth. An offering to the sky, not made of stone or gold, but of labor repetition alignment, walking the same path again and again until the earth remembers. You crouch beside one. From ground level, it's subtle. A narrow swath of lighter earth, maybe a meter wide. But as you follow it, you realize it doesn't end. It crosses a ridge, disappears into a ravine, picks up again on the other side, still heading in the same unwavering direction. And here's the part that makes your skin prickle. These aren't random. Many of the lines intersect at specific points nodes. From those nodes, multiple lines radiate out like spokes on a wheel or rays from a sun. It feels designed, not chaotic, not accidental, and still, the official maps barely show them. Why? Maybe because they're so vast, so quiet, so unmonumental. They don't rise up. They don't cast shadows. They don't demand attention. They just are. Ancient memory laid out like thread on the earth. You wonder who started the first line and why. Was it a priest? A pilgrim? A farmer marking sacred ground? Did they know it would be followed for centuries? Did they even intend it to last? Or were they simply participating in something bigger than themselves? A cultural rhythm that moved not with conquest, but with footfall. Some researchers point out that the Sajama lines connect to burial towers cholpas, where the bones of ancestors rest in stone silos staring toward the mountains. Others note that the lines seem to aim toward those same mountains, massive peaks known as appas, revered as spiritual guardians. Were the lines roads to the ancestors, or roads for them? Did the people walk them in life, and then again in death? Did each line carry stories, weddings, funerals, harvests, prayers, etched into dust by feet and time? Historians still debate whether the Sajama lines had astronomical, social, or spiritual functions. The truth might be all three, or something else entirely. There are no inscriptions, no signs, no declarations, just intention. And maybe that's what makes them different. You can't conquer a line. You can't loot it or enshrine it in a museum. You can only walk it, follow it, become part of it. And maybe that's the point. Because when you walk a Sajama line, you're not just moving through space. You're moving through history, through memory. You're stepping where thousands have stepped before you, all heading towards something or someone or somewhere they believed mattered. The lines were never meant to be looked at. They were meant to be walked. As the wind picks up and the high-altitude sun slants across the land, the lines begin to fade from view again. From ground level, they retreat into the dust, into the silence. But you know they're still there, like veins in the earth, pulsing with something ancient and unfinished. And as you turn to leave, one question follows you like a shadow. What if the Sajama lines aren't the remnants of a ritual? What if they are the ritual, still active, still sacred, still calling, and still waiting to be understood? There's no crowd here, no velvet ropes or tour guides, just a red sandstone cliff on the edge of Lake Titicaca, wind-scoured and sun-bleached with an oddly symmetrical shape carved right into its face. At first, it doesn't look like much. Just a rectangle, 7 meters wide, 7 meters tall, with a smaller person-sized niche centered in the bottom half, like a doorway leading absolutely nowhere. You walk closer, squinting against the Bolivian light. The rectangle isn't natural. The edges are too clean, too smooth. The smaller doorway almost polished inside, as if thousands of hands had touched it, or one person had touched it thousands of times. This is Aramumuru, known locally as La Puerta de los Dioses, the Gate of the Gods. And standing in front of it, you can feel why. The rock doesn't hum, or glow, or whisper your name, but it pulls. There's a sense that something happened here, or is meant to happen here, and you're just too late, or too early. Mainstream archaeologists call it a ceremonial carving, possibly Inca, possibly older, a symbolic altar, a project never finished. Maybe it was once part of a temple complex that's long since been buried or destroyed. Or maybe it was just one man's attempt to leave his mark in stone. But if you ask the locals, the Aymara and Quechua people who've lived around this lake for generations, they'll tell you something different. They'll tell you it's a door. Not metaphorically, not poetically, literally. According to legend, Aramumuru was a high priest of the ancient civilization of Mu. Yes, another lost continent, and when his people were destroyed, he fled with a sacred object, a golden disc said to have the power of the sun itself. Chased by enemies, Aramumuru came to this cliff, and using the disc, opened the doorway. Witnesses say the stone shimmered with blue light. He stepped through and vanished forever. The story doesn't end there. To this day, shamans and spiritual seekers from around the world make pilgrimages here. They meditate within the niche. They press their foreheads to the stone. Some claim to feel vibrations. Others say they lose track of time. A few speak of visions of stars, tunnels, otherworldly voices. You run your hand along the edge of the niche. The surface is smooth, worn, not by tools, but by people. People who've stood here hoping to feel what Aramumuru felt, that click in the soul that says you're standing in the right place at the right time. Still, there's no mechanism, no inscriptions, no hidden hinges or secret glyphs. Just stone, carved with careful hands and deep intention. Historians still debate whether Aramumuru is a ritual site, a forgotten doorway, or a case of compelling coincidence. But its placement is peculiar. The door faces west toward the setting sun. That matters. In many Andean traditions, the West is associated with death, transformation, and journeys into the unknown. It's the direction you go when your time here is done. The last horizon. Coincidence maybe, but maybe not. Some theorists suggest that Aramumuru could be a remnant of a larger system, a network of energy gates scattered across the Andes, aligned with ley lines or planetary grids. Others point to similar false doors in ancient Egyptian tombs, portals not meant for bodies, but for spirits, markers between worlds. It makes you wonder, what if this is a doorway, but not one meant for feet? What if it was designed for something else, something energetic, emotional, spiritual? What if it was a technology not of metal or gears, but of intention? And that raises a thornier question. What happened to that knowledge? If ancient people could shape stone to focus energy, if they believed places like this could connect to something greater. Did they leave instructions? Did someone forget to translate them? Or did we stop listening? Because something about Aramu Muru doesn't feel abandoned. It feels paused, like a sentence waiting for its last word. As you stand within the niche, your shoulders just fitting between the carved walls, you feel the rock press in on both sides. Not uncomfortably, but with familiarity. It's not a room. It's not even a passage. It's a moment in stone. You close your eyes. The wind brushes your skin. The sound of the lake rolls in, soft and slow. And for just a second, you feel stillness, not the absence of movement, but the presence of waiting, as if the stone remembers, as if it knows. Some claim that the doorway can only be opened with the right vibration, achieved through meditation or chant, or the mythical golden disc. Others say the door isn't in the stone at all, but in the person standing inside it, that it opens you. Historians still debate whether Aramu Muru is a remnant of Inca craftsmanship, pre-Inca mystery, or pure folklore. No tools have been found, no structures nearby, no texts that explain its purpose, just a shape and a story. But as the sun dips behind the mountains and the last light pools around the niche like golden water, you understand something. You're not supposed to know what this is. You're supposed to feel it, to wonder, to lean your head against the stone and ask questions you can't Google. Aramu Muru isn't about certainty. It's about invitation. An invitation to remember, to imagine, to consider that not all doors need to open. Some are meant to stay closed until you're ready to see what's on the other side. You're standing in the Valley of Mexico, surrounded by the low murmur of wind and time. Before you stretches a road unlike any you've ever walked, a long, wide avenue flanked by pyramids and plazas. It runs straight toward the horizon like a command, and its name is almost poetic, the Avenue of the Dead. This is Teotihuacan, and no one knows who built it. At its height, Teotihuacan was one of the largest cities in the world, home to over 100,000 people, with a grid layout more precise than many modern cities, a sophisticated water system, multi-story apartment complexes, and vast religious complexes aligned to the movements of the stars. And yet the city's builders left behind no writing to tell us who they were. The Aztecs found it centuries later, already abandoned, and named it Teotihuacan, the place where the gods were made. They believed the gods had once walked here, that this was the site of divine birth. They didn't build it. They just inherited its ghost. So, what was this place? You walk the Avenue of the Dead, your shoes tapping over ancient basalt. To your right rises the Pyramid of the Sun, tall as a 20-story building, perfectly aligned to the setting sun on the summer solstice. To your left, farther off, the Pyramid of the Moon, nestled at the foot of the Cerro Gordo mountain. Behind you, the Temple of the Feathered Serpent Quetzalcoatl, where hundreds of sacrificial victims were once buried beneath layers of myth and masonry. But despite the awe, the real mystery lies in the silence. There are no known records from Teotihuacan's original inhabitants. No royal names, no definitive language, no clear religion, just architecture, geometry, bones, and an urban plan so advanced you might forget it's over 1,500 years old. Historians still debate who built Teotihuacan. Some suggest it was the Toltecs. Others argue it was a multi-ethnic effort, a coalition of cultures who created something greater than the sum of their parts. There are Zapotec Maya and Mixtec influences in the art and construction, but no one group claims it. It just appeared, and then it vanished. Not overnight, but slowly. Sometime around the 6th century, the city began to decline. Buildings were burned, temples desecrated. The elite seemed to have been violently overthrown, and the city fell into ruin. By the time the Aztecs arrived, it was a place of reverence, not residence. So what happened? Some point to internal strife, an uprising of the lower classes against a rigid elite. Others cite drought, famine, or disease. But even those theories don't explain why such a vast, carefully constructed civilization would leave behind no written legacy. It's like they vanished on purpose. And here's where things get even stranger. In 2003, archaeologists discovered a tunnel beneath the Temple of the Feathered Serpent, sealed for over 1,800 years. What they found inside wasn't treasure, but something far more curious, a series of chambers filled with strange minerals, including mica and liquid mercury. Mica is known for its insulating properties. Mercury for its ability to reflect and conduct energy. Were these symbolic offerings, ritual materials, or technology? Fringe theorists suggest the tunnels beneath Teotihuacan may have been used for more than ceremonies, that the materials found along with the precision of the layout point to some forgotten form of energy manipulation, power generation, vibrational control. It sounds far-fetched. Until you consider that mica has also been found in the pyramids of Egypt and India. Coincidence? Maybe, but the alignments aren't coincidental. The city is laid out on a diagonal 15.5 degrees east of true north. Why? Because that orientation aligns with the rising of the Pleiades, a star cluster revered by many ancient cultures. It also matches important solar events, such as equinoxes and zenith passages. Teotihuacan wasn't just a city. It was a calendar, a clock, a living model of the cosmos, and nobody writes cosmic calculator into a blueprint by accident. As you reach the top of the Pyramid of the Sun, panting a little, a lot, you see what the ancients saw, a valley shaped like a cradle, a road stretching to eternity, pyramids aligned to heaven. You feel something shift, not in the earth, but in your perception. This wasn't just built to impress, it was built to remember. Historians still debate whether the rituals performed here were meant to ensure fertility, mark time, or bridge the gap between this world and the next. They likely did all three. But it's the consistency, the planning, that unsettles you. Because someone knew what they were doing, and they're gone. Some say the builders were part of a lost civilization, older than we admit, whose knowledge was inherited piecemeal by later cultures. Others believe they were migrants fleeing climate catastrophe, bringing with them the last memory of an earlier world. Whatever the case, the city is still here, still standing, still waiting. You descend the pyramid, passing tourists, school children, a shaman offering blessings. The stones feel warm beneath your feet. The city breathes. And though the language is lost, the message remains. We were here. We saw the stars. We built a mirror of the heavens. Now it's your turn. You're halfway up a mountain in Peru, and you're not even sure how you got here. Not metaphorically. You literally don't know how anyone got these stones up here. The air is thin, the switchbacks unforgiving, and yet scattered all around you are blocks of red granite, each one weighing dozens of tons. Some rest atop steep terraces, others sit fitted perfectly into walls, with joints so precise they look 3D printed. You're standing in Ollantaytambo, and no matter how long you stare at it, it refuses to make sense. Located in this sacred valley, not far from Machu Picchu, Ollantaytambo is often called the living Inca city. People still live and farm here, still walk its ancient stone streets, still drink from its Inca water channels that run crystal clear centuries after they were first laid. But the ruins perched above the town, that's where the mystery blooms. Let's start with the obvious. The sheer size of the stones. The Sun Temple, perched like a crown at the site's highest point, is made from massive red granite slabs, each weighing up to 50 tons. These aren't local rocks. They were quarried across the valley, at a site known as Kachikata, on the opposite mountain more than 6 kilometers away. To get them here, you'd have to drag them down a mountain, cross a river, then haul them up another mountain. No wheels, no cranes, no iron tools. Go ahead, try that with modern construction gear. We'll wait. Historians still debate how the Inca moved these blocks. The prevailing theory: ramps, manpower, and a lot of rope. But the scale of it boggles the mind. Moving one stone like that is a feat. Moving dozens, that's not construction, that's obsession. And yet it wasn't enough to just move the stones. They had to fit. The walls at Ollantaytambo show the same jaw-dropping precision seen at Sacsayhuamán and Machu Picchu. Stones with dozens of angles slot together like puzzle pieces. Not only do they stay put without mortar, but they've also survived centuries of earthquakes that flattened modern buildings. Some corners are beveled. Others are perfectly smooth, and many contain those strange knobs again, little protrusions left on the stone as if the builders wanted to say, "We were here." We knew what we were doing, but here's where Ollantaytambo gets even weirder. The site isn't just beautiful, it's intentional. The Temple of the Sun is aligned to catch the first light of the winter solstice. On that day, sunlight shines through a notch in the surrounding peaks and illuminates the temple with surgical precision. That's not luck. That's astronomy carved into stone. And the stones themselves, they weren't shaped hastily. Many show signs of having been worked with tools we don't fully understand. The red granite is harder than the tools the Inca supposedly had access to. And some cuts are so clean, so flat they look machine-made. Could they have used some kind of lost technique softening stone, perhaps, as the legends suggest? Or were these shaped with stone hammers and endless patience? Even the most conservative estimates require thousands of workers laboring for decades. And still, no one knows why they stopped. Because the temple is unfinished. Several blocks lie at the base of the mountain, abandoned mid-transport. Others sit beside the Sun Temple, neatly arranged but never installed. Something happened, maybe the arrival of the Spanish, maybe civil war, maybe something else, and construction halted. So what was it meant to be? A temple to the sun, a royal tomb, a cosmic observatory, or something older? Some theorists believe Ollantaytambo wasn't just an Inca site, but a restoration of an even more ancient complex. They point to the differences in construction, the lower foundations made of far larger stones, more eroded with a different style than the upper levels. It's the same pattern we've seen before, newer civilizations inheriting something they didn't build, but recognized as important. And it gets stranger still. From a nearby vantage point, you can see a giant face carved into the mountain itself. Or perhaps it is the mountain. It's not subtle, a forehead nose, lips, even an eye socket. Local legend says this is Tunupa, a sacred figure protector of the valley. Others call it Viracocha, the great god said to have walked the Andes long before the Inca. Coincidence? Natural erosion, or deliberate shaping of the landscape itself? Historians still debate whether the face is natural enhanced or purely illusion. But standing here, looking at blocks the size of shipping containers balanced on a terrace 800 meters above sea level, everything feels deliberate. You hike down toward the terraces, long green steps carved into the hillside for farming. These aren't just practical, they're beautiful, flowing with the curve of the mountain, engineered to catch rainfall, prevent erosion, and create microclimates that allowed the Inca to grow crops at impossible altitudes. And once again, you're left wondering how much of this was learned, how much was remembered, and how much was inherited. Because the deeper you look, the more it feels like the Inca weren't just builders, they were caretakers. Caretakers of stone, of symmetry, of something older than memory, older than conquest, older even than the mountain's own name. As the sun dips lower and casts golden shadows across the red granite, you place your hand on one of the stones. It's warm, rough, impossibly smooth in places. The edge between what's man-made and what's natural feels thinner here. Like Ollantaytambo itself is an echo of a time when those boundaries didn't matter, a time when we knew how to move mountains, not by force, but by understanding. And the ruins, they're not broken. They're waiting for someone to finish the sentence. It's hot. Not in a beachy, sun-on-your-face kind of way, but in a heavy, breath-slowing, time-forgets-you-here kind of way. You're deep in the Cambodian jungle, standing in the midst of the largest religious monument in the world. This is Angkor Wat, and despite its beauty, its world-famous symmetry, its endless corridors of carvings, its lotus-topped towers, the strangest thing about Angkor Wat might be that we don't fully understand it, because this isn't just a temple, it's a city, a symbol, a cosmological machine made of stone, built in the early 12th century by King Sacsayhuamán II. Angkor Wat was originally a Hindu temple dedicated to Vishnu. Over time, it transitioned into a Buddhist site. But it didn't shrink. With time, it grew more complex, more layered, like it was meant to hold more than one belief at once. The structure itself is massive, over 400 acres of galleries, courtyards, causeways, towers, and moats. But it's not just big, it's aligned. The entire temple complex is oriented west, which is unusual for Hindu temples. They typically face east. Scholars debate the reason. Some say it's linked to Vishnu, a deity associated with the West. Others believe it reflects funerary symbolism, a spiritual gateway toward death and rebirth. And some believe it represents the setting sun, the descent into the underworld, and the promise of renewal. But here's where it gets weird. The layout of Angkor Wat mirrors the Hindu cosmology of Mount Meru, the mythical mountain at the center of the universe. The central tower represents Meru itself. The surrounding towers, the peaks around it, the moat, the cosmic ocean that encircles everything. So, you're walking through a physical model of the universe. No pressure. The precision doesn't end there. Researchers have found that the dimensions of the temple correspond to units of time. For instance, the length of the outer walls reflects the number of days in a solar year. The central towers line up with the equinox sunrise. In other words, Angkor Wat is also a calendar, not a metaphorical one, but a working astronomical tool. Historians still debate whether this was intentional or just an extremely elegant accident. But let's be honest, this many alignments, that's not luck. That's knowledge. Knowledge that someone somewhere possessed in the 12th century or earlier. But Angkor Wat is only the beginning. Because the temple is just one part of the ancient city of Angkor, once the capital of the Khmer Empire, and in its prime, Angkor may have been the largest pre-industrial city in the world. It wasn't until the advent of airborne laser scanning LiDAR in the early 2000s that we realized just how vast Angkor truly was. Beneath the jungle canopy, hidden by centuries of overgrowth, lay an entire network of roads, canals, reservoirs, neighborhoods, and temples. The city was organized, gridded, engineered, and then it was abandoned. By the 15th century, Angkor had fallen. The reasons are still unclear. Some blame war with neighboring Siam. Others say it was climate change droughts, followed by floods, overwhelming the city's delicate hydraulic systems. And some whisper about deeper, more esoteric causes. A cosmic balance upset, a great cycle ending. But what lingers is this: how could such a sophisticated civilization, with such astronomical knowledge, such architectural mastery, vanish so completely? You walk through the galleries of Angkor Wat, along the bas-reliefs carved into the stone scenes of gods and demons, heaven and hell, celestial battles, and earthly lives. The carvings aren't chaotic. They follow stories, tell time, and code movement. Some believe the entire gallery is a kind of spiritual instruction manual, a path the soul is meant to walk after death. One figure appears over and over: Apsara celestial dancers with elaborate hairstyles, graceful hands, and slight serene smiles. There are over 1,700 of them, each one different, unique, as if each were based on a real woman, a real memory, a real moment cast into stone so it could dance forever. But here's a riddle. How do you carve 1,700 unique figures into a temple and not repeat a single one? Historians still debate whether the Apsaras were created by teams of sculptors working from life, or whether the individuality was symbolic. But it's the consistency that's unsettling. Like a single vision moved through many hands. Like the temple was being built by memory or instruction. You reach the upper terraces where the crowds thin and the silence grows. Up here, you feel the scale of it all, the symmetry, the intent, and you realize something. Angkor Wat wasn't built to impress. It was built to embody not just religion, not just royalty, but reality itself. The cycles of time, the rhythm of the stars, the bridge between earth and sky. It's not just a monument, it's a mechanism. And perhaps that's the strangest thing of all, because when you look at modern cities, grids and towers and roads, you see function, utility, growth. But when you look at Angkor Wat, you see understanding, a worldview carved into stone, a civilization that believed the sacred and the scientific weren't separate, that time, space, and spirit were all part of the same architecture. And then it disappeared. No massive war, no dramatic collapse, just silence. Vines growing up the towers, roots breaking into courtyards, and a story no one finished writing. Now, modern archaeologists with satellites and lasers are mapping what the jungle tried to forget. But they're still guessing, still piecing together a puzzle without the box. Because Angkor Wat won't tell you its secrets. It just waits in the heat, in the haze, in the smile of a stone dancer whose name no one remembers, but whose rhythm still moves through the world. You're in Japan now, but not the neon-crowded kind. This is far south off this coast of Yonaguni Island, where the land gives way to coral and surf, and the Pacific stretches so far it starts to feel imaginary. But it's not the surface that matters here. It's what lies beneath. Strap on your dive gear, take a deep breath, and plunge into the sea. The water is startlingly clear, sunlight filtering through like a dream. You descend slowly, and then it comes into view. A staircase. No, not a coral-covered rock or a gentle slope. This is stone, geometric, layered, as if someone carved steps directly into the seabed. You keep descending. More angles appear. Platforms, flat walls, terraces, massive blocks. A triangular wedge, a trench that runs like a boulevard. And at the heart of it all, a broad stepped structure rising up from the ocean floor like a sunken temple. This is the Yonaguni Monument, and no one can agree whether it's natural or man-made. First discovered in 1986 by a local diver, the site quickly became a lightning rod for controversy. At a depth of around 25 meters, about 80 feet, the formation stretches over 150 meters in length and 25 meters tall. And it doesn't look random. The surfaces are flat. The corners are sharp. Some ledges appear to follow a grid-like pattern. There are what seem to be doorways, roads, canals features that scream intentional. But by whom? And when Japan's mainstream geologists mostly say it's a natural formation, a phenomenon of tectonic activity and water erosion acting on sandstone layers, creating straight lines, sheer walls, and tiered shapes. And yes, that does happen. Nature can be surprisingly geometric when it wants to be. But here's the catch. Most natural formations don't come with what looks like a staircase. They don't come with perfectly spaced platforms. And they certainly don't come with symbols. Divers have reported markings, scratches, lines, and even what might be carvings on some surfaces. One formation has been nicknamed the face, a weathered profile that looks uncannily like a humanoid figure. Another has been likened to a small pyramid or stepped altar. There's even what some believe to be a path leading toward a series of upright megaliths arranged like gates or pylons. Historians still debate whether the Yonaguni Monument is an underwater temple, a ceremonial plaza, or just a geologic accident with excellent public relations. But if it's man-made, it changes everything. Why? Because the last time sea levels were low enough to expose that part of the seabed was around 10,000 years ago at the end of the last ice age. That's 5,000 years before the first pyramids in Egypt. Long before written history, long before we're supposed to have had organized civilization capable of carving and assembling massive stone structures. And yet there it sits. If Yonaguni is truly artificial, it would be one of the oldest known man-made structures on Earth. So who built it? Some speculate it could be connected to the legendary continent of Mu, a Pacific version of Atlantis said to have vanished beneath the sea in a cataclysm. Others suggest it was part of an early Japanese culture, long forgotten and swept away by time and tide. Professor Masaki Kimura, a marine geologist who studied Yonaguni for years, remains convinced it's artificial. He claims to have identified quarry marks, roads retaining walls, even sculptures resembling animals and humans. But many of his colleagues disagree, calling his interpretations hopeful at best. And that's where Yonaguni lives, in the tension between hope and science, between pattern and chaos, between what we know and what we want to be true. You hover above the largest platform, scanning its edges. It feels like you're looking at the foundation of a ziggurat or a ceremonial plaza designed to host rituals now lost to salt and silence. The scale is enormous, but the details are what catch your breath. Edges that feel too clean, steps that rise just a little too uniformly, and those strange flat panels, as if someone once stood here, looking out across the sea before it swallowed everything. And there's the mystery. Nothing this large and deliberate should be underwater, unless something went terribly cosmically wrong. Was there an earthquake? A flood? A slow rise in sea levels that left an entire culture watching their world vanish an inch at a time. There's no writing, no tools, no bones. The sea has scoured it clean, but it left the shape, and sometimes shape is enough. Historians still debate whether this site is the tip of a submerged city or an elaborate geological illusion. But what everyone agrees on is this: the mystery of Yonaguni is not just what it is, but what it means. Because even if it's natural, even if it's just stone cracked by water and pressure, the fact that it looks so intentional speaks to something deeper, to our desire for continuity, to our hope that the past still has something left to say. As you rise toward the surface, your last glance down shows the monument fading into blue again. Quiet, waiting, half remembered. Yonaguni doesn't give answers. It gives invitations to wonder, to explore, to consider that just maybe once upon a time, the ocean floor was a plaza, and someone walked across it. The desert is a strange place for secrets. There's nothing to hide behind. No jungle, no canopy, no sweeping tide to swallow history whole. And yet somehow, some of the greatest enigmas on Earth are etched right into the skin of the driest places imaginable. Welcome to Nazca. You're in southern Peru, standing on ochre-red soil under an endless blue sky. Everything is quiet, too quiet. The wind barely stirs. The sun presses down with the heat of a judgment, and stretching out around you are lines, endless lines, perfectly straight for kilometers. Trapezoid spirals, zigzags. Some stretch across the flatlands like ancient highways. Others suddenly bloom into massive drawings, what archaeologists call geoglyphs, and what the rest of us just call impossible. The Nazca Lines. You've seen the photos before, maybe a monkey with a curling tail, a spider, a hummingbird the size of a football field. But photos don't prepare you for the scale, or the silence, or the feeling that something's watching. There are over 800 straight lines, 300 geometric figures, and around 70 animal and plant designs here. And they were all made by removing the top layer of dark rock to reveal the pale earth underneath. Simple right scrape away a bit of dirt, make a shape. Except these shapes are hundreds of feet wide and only fully visible from the air. Let that sink in. The lines were created somewhere between 500 BCE and 500 CE, long before aircraft satellites or even hot air balloons. So how did the Nazca people design figures so large, so precise, that you need altitude just to see them? Historians still debate whether they used grids, ropes, stakes, and clever geometry to scale up small drawings into massive ones. It's possible many have replicated it with stick and string methods. But possible isn't the same as provable. And more importantly, it doesn't explain why. That's the real question. Why draw a 300-foot-long condor you can't even see unless you're flying? Why make perfect geometric runways in a world without aircraft? Why here? Some believe the lines were ceremonial pathways, walked by priests in ritual processions. Others say they're astronomical calendars aligned with solstices, star risings, or seasonal water patterns. Some lines seem to point toward mountain peaks or sacred springs. A few researchers even claim the animals mirror constellations in the night sky like a southern hemisphere zodiac. And then there's the stranger stuff. Some lines end abruptly, others intersect in ways that make no practical sense. One spiral seems to lead nowhere. Some shapes have been scraped and redone as if their meanings were updated or overwritten. And then there are the ones that resemble landing strips, wide, flat, cleared runways. Even the more grounded archaeologists admit that some of these lines, up to 30 kilometers long and perfectly straight, serve no obvious ceremonial or navigational purpose. Unless you're trying to guide something from above, you can guess where this is going. The ancient astronaut theory, popularized by Erich von Däniken and his contemporaries, suggests the Nazca Lines were made as messages to the gods, or landing markers for extraterrestrial visitors, signals etched in stone saying, "This way, please." The figures, especially the humanoid ones, are interpreted as stylized depictions of alien beings. Sounds silly maybe, but the mystery lingers. Even the Peruvian government isn't entirely sure what to do with them. The lines are protected, yes, but still exposed to time tourism and the occasional protest march that accidentally scuffs up a 1,000-year-old hummingbird. More recently, drones have uncovered even more geoglyphs, some smaller hidden beneath hills, faint but unmistakable. These newer discoveries suggest that the line-making tradition lasted for centuries, evolving over time. Some figures are older than others, some more detailed, some overlapping. That complicates things, because it means the lines weren't made all at once by a single culture with a singular purpose. They were maintained, added to, respected, like a living library carved in soil. But the books are in a language we no longer speak. You kneel by the edge of one line. It's no deeper than a footprint, just a few inches of dust removed. That's all it takes to make a mark that lasts 2,000 years. And yet, not a single record remains of how they were created. No tools, no scaffolding, no diaries, no temple inscriptions. Just the lines themselves, silent, sprawling, stubborn. Historians still debate whether the figures were religious, scientific, agricultural, or astronomical in nature. Some say they map underground water sources. Others think they were a form of art, expressive, symbolic, ephemeral. But nothing about Nazca feels ephemeral. It feels permanent, like a message meant to outlive language, a signal to the future, or to the stars. And here's a detail people don't often mention: the spider. One of the most famous figures. It's anatomically correct to a species of spider that's only visible under a microscope. Explain that. And what about the monkey? Its curled tail forms a perfect spiral. Spirals appear across ancient cultures as symbols of eternity, energy, the cosmos. The monkey's design echoes the golden ratio. Coincidence maybe, but coincidence gets tired around here. As the sun drops low, the desert glows a deep copper. The shadows stretch across the lines. They don't look like drawings anymore. They look like sentences, fragments of a forgotten alphabet etched into the earth, waiting for anyone to read them correctly. You realize something then. The Nazca Lines aren't just big, they're patient. And in a world obsessed with speed, that patience feels revolutionary. These people carved messages into the dirt, knowing no one alive would ever fully see them. They weren't looking for credit. They were reaching for something else, something beyond their time, their tools, their sky. Maybe they failed, or maybe we're just not ready to understand. Not yet. The hills of Ireland roll gently under your boots, green, misty, and quiet. You're surrounded by fields dotted with sheep and stone walls, and everything feels older than memory. But then the hill rises, a bump in the landscape that doesn't quite match the rest. This is no ordinary hill. This is Newgrange. From the outside, it looks deceptively simple, like a large grassy dome with a white stone base. But step closer, and you'll realize This isn't a hill. It's a structure. A passage tomb, technically. But even that term falls short. This is a cathedral of stone, older than the pyramids. Let that sit for a second. Newgrange was built around 3200 BCE. That makes it over 5,000 years old, older than Stonehenge, older than the oldest ziggurats, older than almost anything else still standing on this planet. And it's not just old, it's aligned. At the winter solstice, just once a year, sunlight streams through a narrow opening above the doorway. A shaft of light travels down a 19-meter passage and illuminates the central chamber, perfectly striking a carved stone basin in the heart of the tomb. For 17 minutes, the sun reaches into the dark and touches stone. That's not random. That's engineering. That's astronomy encoded in architecture by people who had no written language, no metal tools, and no wheels. Historians still debate how Neolithic builders managed such precision. The alignment is so exact that even a slight shift would block the beam. They had to calculate not only the solar position, but the rise of the horizon, the slope of the land, and the tilt of the earth. And they got it right. You walk through the passage, a tight corridor lined with massive orthostats, each stone etched with spirals, chevrons, lozenges, and wave-like patterns. No one knows what the symbols mean. Maybe they were religious. Maybe they were maps. Maybe they were just art. But the repetition suggests intent. Language of a kind. The walls speak, they just don't speak English. The central chamber opens up like a stone flower. Corbelled vaulting stretches above you in a perfect dome, each layer of stone slightly overlapping the one below, creating a beehive structure that has not leaked a single drop of rain in 5 millennia. That's right, no mortar, no cement, and it's bone dry. This is craftsmanship, born not just of skill, but of understanding. The kind of understanding that's hard to explain. You don't just pile stones like this unless you know why it works. And that's the mystery. Because the people who built Newgrange left no name, no story, no king's decree. Just a monument, massive aligned, and deeply, almost impossibly thoughtful. Who were they? We call them the builders of the Bruna Boyne complex, which includes nearby mounds like Noth and Douth. But that's just a label. We don't know their language. We don't know their myths. What we do know is that they moved stones weighing up to 10 tons from over 75 kilometers away, without wheels, over marshy terrain, with ropes logs and sheer determination. Why? To build a place that aligned with the death of the sun, not its birth, not its height, but its disappearance. And that speaks volumes. Maybe they weren't worshiping the sun, but honoring the dark, honoring the return of the light after the longest night, building a cosmic clock, not for the living, but for the dead. Because Newgrange is a tomb, human remains mostly cremated were found inside, along with beads, pendants, bone tools. But it's not a cemetery in the modern sense. This was a place of passage, a place where the soul might travel from this world to the next, and the sun, that beam of light each winter. Maybe it wasn't just sunlight. Maybe it was permission, a sign that the path had opened, that the dead could rise and journey again. Historians still debate whether Newgrange was a religious center, an astronomical observatory, a calendar, or a portal. It could be all of them, or something else entirely, because the more you learn, the less you understand. Some of the stones at Newgrange feature triple spirals, a symbol found nowhere else in quite the same way. Not before, not after, just here. And no one agrees what it means. Some say it represents the cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. Others say it symbolizes time, the past, present, and future. Some even believe it encodes a deeper mathematical truth, a cosmic rhythm still waiting to be decoded. You run your hand along one of the spirals, cool and rough. It's been here longer than any empire, any alphabet, any known god. And it hasn't moved, not once. That's the power of stone. It doesn't forget. And here's something else: Newgrange isn't alone. Across Ireland, Britain, and parts of Europe, there are other passage tombs, other mounds, other alignments. It's like a civilization once existed that saw time not in hours, but in light. That measured the soul's journey in solstices and shadows, and left behind clocks made of stone. But Newgrange is the masterpiece, and it still works. Every year, people gather for the solstice. A few lucky names are drawn from a lottery to enter the chamber and witness the light. For those 17 minutes, time collapses. You are standing where someone stood 5,000 years ago, watching the same beam of sunlight touch the same spot on the same day. And you realize we're not so different. We still fear the dark. We still hope for the light. We still build things, great things, in the name of memory and mystery. And though the builders of Newgrange are nameless, their monument speaks louder than any epic. It says, "We were here. We watched the sky. We understood something you've forgotten." And then it waits until the light returns. You're on the edge of a quiet valley in Turkey, just outside the dusty town of Şanlıurfa. The land is dry, golden, open. Nothing about it screams ancient marvel. And yet, as you descend a few shallow steps into the excavation site, history tilts sideways. Because this pile of carved stones and circular enclosures surrounded by scaffolding and tarps is the oldest known temple on Earth. This is Gobekli Tepe, and it shouldn't exist. It was discovered in 1994 by a Kurdish shepherd who noticed a stone poking out of the ground, flat, large, obviously shaped. Archaeologists soon arrived and started brushing back the soil. What they uncovered broke every assumption about the origins of civilization. Gobekli Tepe is at least 11,000 years old. That means it predates Stonehenge by 6,000 years. The pyramids by $7,000. It was built when humans were still supposed to be simple hunter-gatherers, nomadic, survival-focused, socially primitive. No agriculture, no cities, no priests, no monuments. And yet, here stand T-shaped limestone pillars, some over 16 feet tall and weighing 10 tons, arranged in circular enclosures, carved with animals, foxes, snakes, wild boars, vultures etched in relief with astonishing skill. Some are stylized, others are naturalistic. A few seem symbolic. And the pillars, they're not just standing upright. Many are paired, two tall ones in the center surrounded by smaller ones, like they're telling a story, like a ritual space, like a shrine, or something older. Historians still debate who built Gobekli Tepe. We have no name for them, no language, no pottery, no houses, no burial chambers. Just tools, flint blades, stone hammers, simple instruments. And these massive megalithic enclosures, built by people who were supposed to be barely past banging rocks together. You walk between the stones. They tower above you. Each one smooth, weathered, quiet, but full of intent. Some are blank. Others bear animals locked in action, biting, circling, slithering. One shows a headless man. Another, a predator poised to strike. What do they mean? No one knows. Some believe the carvings are totemic clan symbols, or mythological creatures. Others see celestial patterns, constellations encoded in stone. A few researchers suggest they depict a cosmic catastrophe, perhaps a comet strike preserved in symbolic form. And here's the twist. The entire site was deliberately buried, not abandoned, buried. Layer after layer of backfill, stone dirt debris meticulously packed into every enclosure. It's why the site was preserved so well. Someone, thousands of years after its construction, carefully entombed it. Why? To protect it, to seal it, to end something. Historians still debate whether the burial was ritual, political, or apocalyptic. But the act was intentional, thoughtful, and it raises a darker possibility. What if we weren't meant to find it? You sit near one of the central pillars, marked with abstract arms and hands, clasped together in front like a humanoid figure standing in stillness. It doesn't have a face, just presence. As if the stone is not a representation, but a placeholder, a stand-in for something beyond itself. Many of the pillars have no inscriptions, no language as we know it. But some believe they are language symbols, too old to resemble letters, but too intentional to be art. An language, an alphabet of stone gestures. One we lost long before the wheel was invented. And that changes everything, because Gobekli Tepe wasn't built by a literate culture. No scrolls, no epics, no clay tablets, just stones. Which means maybe civilization didn't begin with writing. Maybe it began with memory, with myth, with monuments meant to hold a story in place long after the storytellers were gone. The timing is uncanny. Gobekli Tepe was constructed right on the edge of the Neolithic Revolution, the shift from hunting to farming. But here's the chicken and egg question. Did agriculture allow people to build temples, or did the temple come first? What if the need to gather, to worship, to create sacred space sparked civilization? Historians still debate whether Gobekli Tepe was the beginning of organized religion or something entirely different. A mystery school, a meeting ground, a calendar, a warning. Whatever it was, it required planning. The stone was quarried nearby, then hauled uphill without wheels, pulleys, or pack animals. Teams had to be organized, roles assigned, food provided. That implies structure, hierarchy, culture. You can't build this with campfire committees. Which begs another question, was Gobekli Tepe unique? Or was it just the one that survived? Recent discoveries in the region, like Karahan Tepe and other buried megalithic sites, suggest Gobekli wasn't alone. It may have been part of a broader network of sacred architecture stretching across what is now southeastern Turkey. A whole world of stone circles and spiritual centers long forgotten. And if that's true, then our timeline is wrong. Civilization didn't begin in Sumer or Egypt or China. It began here in silence, in stone, and then just as mysteriously it stopped. The enclosures were filled in. The memory faded. And for thousands of years, the hill was just a hill. A mound called Potbelly Hill, quietly hiding the fact that everything we thought we knew about human history was buried right underneath, and maybe still is. You rise from the circle. The wind brushes over the hilltop. Around you, more enclosures lie waiting, still unexcavated, still sealed. Archaeologists have barely scratched the surface, literally. Less than 10% of the site has been uncovered. What's underneath? More stones, more symbols, or something we're not ready to understand. Because if Gobekli Tepe proves anything, it's that humanity has amnesia. We forgot how old we are. We forgot how much we once knew. And the stones. They remember? The jungle is thick, relentless, every vine, every root a reminder that nature doesn't erase history gently. It devours it. And yet here, in the dense forests of Guatemala, something refuses to disappear. It rises from the canopy in jagged shadows. Stone towers, poking out of the green, like the fingers of a buried god. You're in Tikal now, one of the great Maya cities, and you're beginning to understand that lost doesn't always mean forgotten. Tikal was once a metropolis, tens of thousands of people, towering pyramids, observatories, ball courts, causeways. Its roots go back to the 4th century BCE, but its peak, between 200 and 900 CE, was a time of architectural brilliance, astronomical precision, and spiritual complexity. And then it vanished. But let's start with what's still standing. The Great Plaza is at the city's heart, framed by the twin pyramids of Temple 1 and Temple 2, known as the Temple of the Great Jaguar and the Temple of the Masks. These are not modest structures. Temple I rises over 150 feet, a steep staircase leading to a narrow summit chamber where a ruler named Jasa Chan Kawil was buried in 734 CE. And if that sounds like standard history, fair dynasties, tombs, stone steps, you're not wrong. But then the calendar enters the conversation. The Maya didn't just build big, they built with time. Every major structure in Tikal and in other Maya cities is aligned with celestial events, solstices, equinoxes, zenith passages, even eclipses. They didn't guess, they calculated. Long before telescopes, long before physics, long before Europe knew how to count leap years, and their calendar, terrifyingly precise. The Maya long count calendar tracks time in cycles that span thousands of years. One of those cycles famously ended in 2012, sparking doomsday predictions that never quite panned out. But the truth is more profound than apocalyptic nonsense. The Maya understood time as cyclical, not linear. As something that returned, folded, mirrored. So why build pyramids? Because pyramids didn't just house tombs. They marked time. Temple 4, the tallest pyramid in Tikal, at over 230 feet, was aligned to observe the setting sun during the winter solstice. Temple 3 aligns with Venus. Temple 5 may mark the zenith passage, a moment when the sun is directly overhead and casts no shadow. These were not just buildings. They were instruments. Historians still debate whether these alignments were purely ritual or whether the Maya possessed observational tools lost to us. But what's clear is that their understanding of the heavens was unmatched in the pre-modern world. And that knowledge, it wasn't static. It was encoded. Stelae, tall carved stones, dot the plazas covered in glyphs, dates, and depictions of rulers performing rituals. These weren't just histories. They were equations. The Maya recorded solar cycles, lunar months, eclipses, even the synodic cycle of Venus, all in glyphs carved over 1,000 years ago. But then came the collapse. Around the 9th century, Tikal began to falter. Construction stopped. Stelae ceased. Temples were left incomplete. The population dropped. And eventually, the city was swallowed by the jungle. Why? Theories abound: warfare with rival cities, environmental degradation, prolonged drought, political instability. Maybe it wasn't one disaster, but a cascade, a tipping point, like a civilization slowly running out of fuel. Or maybe they knew something. Some researchers suggest the Maya elite, obsessed with their calendar, may have interpreted celestial changes as signs of doom. What if they saw something coming in the sky? An alignment, a shift, a message. Historians still debate whether the collapse of the classic Maya was a failure of ecology ideology or prophecy. You climb Temple 4 as the morning fog lifts from the forest canopy. From the summit, you can see the tips of other pyramids rising like islands through a green sea. It's quiet. Birdsong echoes. And you realize these weren't just places of power. They were places of perspective. The Maya believed in 3 realms: the heavens above the living world in the middle, and Xibalba, the underworld below. Their pyramids connected all 3. Staircases weren't just for climbing. They were symbolic ascents through dimensions. And those ceremonial ball courts you've heard about, they weren't just sports arenas. The Maya ball game was a ritual reenactment of the battle between light and dark, life and death. Sometimes the stakes were literal. The losing team or the captain might be sacrificed. It sounds barbaric, but to the Maya, death was a transition, not an end. Sacrifice wasn't punishment. It was participation in the cosmic balance. So what remains of Tikal today? Stone, silence, and questions. Because despite what textbooks may tell you, the Maya didn't disappear. Descendants of this great culture still live across Central America. They speak Mayan languages, keep Mayan customs, honor their ancestors. The cities may have crumbled, but the calendar ticks on. And here's something that doesn't make the brochures. In the 1970s, a Maya priest named Don Alejandro Chirilo Perez Oxlage began warning that sacred knowledge was returning, that the ancient cities would awaken not physically, but spiritually, that we in the modern world were forgetting something vital, something the Maya encoded in stone, not how to build, but why. You descend Temple 4 slowly, the jungle now louder, more alive. The trees sway. The roots twist around blocks of limestone. The earth remembers what we try to forget, and maybe that's the message of Tikal. Not just that the Maya tracked time, but that they trusted it, that every ending, every collapse, every ruin is part of a larger rhythm. And sometimes the past doesn't stay buried. Sometimes it calls you back, not to live as they did, but to remember what they knew. You're in China now, but not in Beijing or Shanghai, not even Xi'an with its world-famous terracotta army. You're out in the Qinling Mountains where the mist curls low over pine-covered slopes, and the horizon feels like a memory you haven't remembered yet. It's quiet here. Too quiet for what lies beneath. Because tucked away in this remote terrain are pyramids. Yes, pyramids. The Chinese pyramids, as they're called, are a collection of massive earthen mounds scattered across the Shanxi province. Some are small, gently sloped, barely distinguishable from the landscape. Others are colossal. One in particular, the so-called White Pyramid, is rumored to dwarf the Great Pyramid of Giza. The problem, no one's allowed to study it. Let's start with the known facts. The most famous confirmed pyramid is the mausoleum of the first Qin emperor, Qin Shi Huang, the same man buried beneath an army of clay soldiers. His tomb is shaped like a stepped pyramid, its peak long eroded, but its base still imposing. According to ancient texts, the tomb contains rivers of mercury, a map of the heavens on the ceiling, and traps to keep intruders out. No one has opened it, not for lack of curiosity, but because the Chinese government has refused excavation, citing the preservation of delicate artifacts and possibly more sensitive reasons. And then there are the others. Satellite imagery and declassified military photos have revealed dozens, maybe even hundreds, of pyramid-shaped structures hidden across the landscape. Some are aligned to cardinal directions. Some are buried under layers of vegetation. And some, according to eyewitnesses and early 20th century explorers, are constructed with white stone and gleam in the sun. Historians still debate whether these pyramids are burial mounds, ceremonial centers, or something more enigmatic. But the deeper you look, the stranger it gets. In 1947, U.S. Army Air Corps pilot James Gaussman claimed to have seen a massive white pyramid while flying over China. He described it as brilliant white, like it was made of metal or stone, and estimated its height at around 1,000 feet, significantly taller than the Great Pyramid in Egypt. A few years later, Colonel Maurice Shahan reported a similar sighting. But despite these reports, the so-called White Pyramid of Xi'an has never been officially acknowledged. Why? The official stance is that most of these structures are just natural hills or imperial tombs from the Han and Tang dynasties. Many are indeed royal burial sites, constructed of packed earth and oriented with ritual precision. But that doesn't explain the secrecy or the alignment, because many of these pyramids are laid out in geometric patterns. Some align with solar events, the solstices, equinoxes, or lunar phases. Others form grids or triangles when mapped. And if you compare them to the layouts of other ancient pyramid fields like Giza or Teotihuacan, patterns begin to emerge. Coincidence possibly, but there's a feeling here, a pattern of memory. You stand at the base of one of the smaller, accessible mounds. It's covered in grass trees growing from its flanks. A narrow trail winds up the side. At the summit, you look out and see more soft shapes on the horizon, too symmetrical to be accidental. No plaques, no signs, no tour buses, just presence. The mystery deepens when you consider what's not being said. Chinese archaeologists have done very little public research on the deeper layers of these pyramids. Some tombs like that of Emperor Wu of Han remain sealed. The government has stated that current technology isn't sufficient to excavate them without damage. And they may be right, but what if that's not the only reason? Some theorists suggest that the reluctance stems from what might be found, not artifacts, but evidence of something older, more sophisticated, perhaps predating Chinese dynastic history itself. Because here's the wild card: ancient Chinese legends speak of sky emperors, celestial beings who descended in fiery dragons and brought knowledge to Earth. The Yellow Emperor, one of the mythical progenitors of Chinese civilization, is often associated with stars and flight. And then there's the myth of Lu Ban, an ancient master builder who supposedly created flying machines and architectural marvels with technologies lost to time. It's easy to dismiss these as myths until you're standing on a man-made mountain that no one can explain. Historians still debate whether these pyramids were built as dynastic tombs by early emperors, or whether they're part of something older, much older. And then there's the mercury. Back at the tomb of Qin Shi, Huang remote sensing has detected unusually high levels of mercury underground, supporting ancient texts that described flowing rivers of liquid metal inside the tomb. Mercury has long been associated with immortality in Chinese alchemy. It's also dangerous, toxic, and incredibly difficult to work with. So why would you flood a tomb with it? Was it symbolic, protective, or something else? Because as we've seen across the world, from India's sealed vaults to the hidden chambers of Egypt, ancient builders seem to treat mercury with an eerie reverence. A tool, perhaps, or a power source. You descend the mound and glance back at its slope. It's eroded, yes, but still too sharp, too even to be dismissed as natural. And somewhere, out beyond the reach of satellite maps and academic consensus, is the White Pyramid, waiting. Some say it's been deliberately covered over reforested to hide it from public view. Others claim it's fictional, just a tall tale passed between pilots and mystics. But the mystery isn't whether one pyramid exists. It's why so many of them do, and why we still know so little about them. You walk back through the trees, the sound of wind rustling bamboo above you. The mountains loom in the distance, quiet, unmoved, and beneath their roots, possibly the oldest chapters of a story no one's finished reading. Not because it's lost, but because it's still being written. You're back in the ocean now, but not diving this time. You're standing on a windswept shore in Micronesia, staring out over a lagoon where ancient stones rise from the shallow water like a forgotten city exhaling from the deep. This is Nan Madol. It's not on the usual history maps, not something you see in documentaries with sweeping orchestral music, but it should be, because this is one of the strangest, least understood ancient sites on Earth. Nan Madol is made up of nearly 100 small artificial islets built on a coral reef just off the coast of Pohnpei Island. And when we say built, we mean constructed with basalt columns weighing up to 50 tons stacked and interlocked to form platforms, walls, canals, temples, and tombs. Imagine Venice now. Imagine if Venice were made from massive hexagonal stone logs quarried miles away, floated or dragged over water, and assembled into an island city for reasons no one fully understands. Yeah, it's like that. Historians call it the Venice of the Pacific, but that nickname barely scratches the surface. Nan Madol is not just an architectural marvel. It's an impossibility. A megalithic complex built on the sea by people with no written language, no metal tools, and no wheels. Let's talk logistics. The basalt columns used in construction are believed to have come from quarries on the opposite side of Pohnpei. That's more than 25 miles overland through jungle and mountain terrain. The local legend that the stones were moved by magic, specifically levitation. The oral histories of Pohnpei say the city was built by twin sorcerers, Olosifa and Olosip, who used chants and spells to fly the stones through the air and drop them gently into place. Sound absurd, of course, but then again, how else do you move 250 million pounds of stone across an island and out onto a coral reef? Theories abound. Some suggest the stones were floated on rafts, except basalt sinks. Others believe they were rolled on logs, but the island's dense jungle didn't offer an abundance of usable timber. And building on coral. That's another issue entirely. Coral is porous, unstable, and unforgiving, yet the foundations hold. Still, after centuries, historians still debate the purpose of Nan Madol. Was it a ceremonial center, a royal palace, a place of sacred seclusion? Archaeological evidence suggests it was the political and religious capital of the Sotoler dynasty, which ruled Pohnpei until about the 1500s. But that explanation raises more questions. Why build it on water? Why here in a place with no natural harbor? No easy access to resources and endless construction challenges. Some say the water kept the city clean. Others argue it was symbolic, a reflection of the cosmos, perhaps with islets representing stars, or the channels mimicking paths of spirits. Some believe the sea itself was considered sacred, and the city was an offering, a mirror to the gods. And then there are the whispers, stories of Nan Madol being much older than officially recognized, possibly built atop an even more ancient foundation. Some say it predates the Sodelur by centuries, maybe millennia. That's where the idea of Lemuria or Mu drifts back into the conversation. If you believe the tales, Nan Madol could be one of the last above-water remnants of a sunken Pacific civilization, one that mastered megalithic engineering, astronomy, and spiritual science long before history began taking notes. Fringe, sure, but the mystery remains. Why do the stones fit together so well? Why are the inner chambers of some islets so precisely leveled? Why do some walls stand in configurations that seem to echo star maps? And why is no one digging deeper? The site is protected, yes, but it's also ignored, underfunded, difficult to access, shrouded in bureaucracy. Very little modern excavation has been done, and large portions of the complex remain unexplored. Some say this is due to respect for the local beliefs, the idea that disturbing Nan Madol brings misfortune. Others think it's logistical. The site is remote, the reef dangerous, the funding scarce. And still, the city waits. You stand at the edge of one of the canals, where water laps quietly against basalt foundations. Small fish dart between the stones. Mangrove roots twist around forgotten steps. A heron watches from a perch above the ruins. It feels suspended, as if the whole city is holding its breath, waiting for the right question to be asked. You walk along one of the raised causeways, smooth stone beneath your feet, and imagine the people who once lived here. Priests, nobles, astronomers, engineers, or maybe just humans, trying to build something eternal in a world where everything drifts. One of the central islets, Nan Doas, contains a large tomb. It was likely the resting place of a Sodelur ruler. The walls rise nearly 25 feet, built from thousands of stone columns stacked like giant matchsticks. It is one of the most impressive pieces of megalithic engineering in Oceania, and it was done without cranes, without steel, without the internet, just human hands and whatever knowledge they possessed, knowledge we no longer seem to have. Historians still debate whether Nan Madol was truly the seat of power for the entire island or something more specialized, an elite ritual complex removed from the common people, designed to elevate its inhabitants above the world quite literally. But even that theory doesn't fully account for the scope, because Nan Madol wasn't built for convenience. It was built with intention, a dream carved in basalt set into the sea. And when the Sodelur were eventually overthrown by a warrior named Isokalekal, according to local legend, the city fell silent. Nature returned. The jungle swallowed the roads. The sea claimed the corners. But it didn't disappear. It just waited. Like so many other places we visited, Nan Madol defies easy answers. It doesn't fit neatly into the narrative of history as a steady upward climb. It suggests something else, a rise, a peak, and a fall, then silence, then memory. And now a question. What did they know that we don't? And why did they carve it into the sea? You're standing in the middle of the Sahara Desert. The sun bears down in waves. The air shimmers. The ground crunches underfoot, an expanse of dust and silence. There's nothing here, except something's off, because if you look at satellite images, Google Earth, perhaps you'll see something unexpected. A shape, a swirl, a massive concentric pattern etched into the landscape like a forgotten fingerprint pressed into the crust of the earth. This is the Rishat structure, also known as the Eye of the Sahara, and nobody can quite explain it. From above, it's hypnotic ring after ring, radiating outward in near-perfect circles, the whole thing measuring over 40 kilometers wide. That's nearly the size of an entire city. But from ground level, it's less dramatic. The formation rises and falls, gently hidden in plain sight, its curves smoothed by time. At first glance, geologists called it a dome, an eroded geologic uplift. Layers of sedimentary rock pushed up and worn away by millions of years of wind and water. That's the official explanation. And to be fair, it mostly makes sense. Mostly. But then someone looked at it differently. Not from a plane, not with a microscope, but with a map. And they saw something strange. The Richat structure, some say, matches the ancient descriptions of Atlantis. You pause at that name. Atlantis, the fabled lost city described by Plato, circular advanced, ringed by water and land, said to lie beyond the Pillars of Hercules in a fertile plain, destroyed in a cataclysm thousands of years ago. It's a legend, yes, but one that has stubbornly clung to the edge of history. And suddenly, the eye of the Sahara looks familiar. 3 concentric rings of land and water check, a central island check, openings to the sea on one side, at least there used to be. Even the scale roughly matches Plato's measurements if you convert from ancient stadia to modern units. Coincidence possibly, but then come the details. Geologists say the Richat structure is around 100 million years old, but its erosion is recent, within the last 10,000 years. That matters, because Plato places Atlantis' destruction at around 9,000 years before his time, roughly 11,600 years ago. That date, curiously enough, coincides with the end of the last ice age, the Younger Dryas, a period of sudden warming, rising seas, and global upheaval. It's when many ancient flood myths are set stories of civilizations swallowed by water of gods, punishing hubris of knowledge lost beneath the waves. So the timing fits. But what about the location? Plato said Atlantis lay beyond the Pillars of Hercules, commonly believed to be the Strait of Gibraltar. That would place Atlantis somewhere in the Atlantic Ocean. But what if Plato got that part wrong? Or what if his source, a blend of Egyptian and Greek traditions, used symbolic language? After all, the Sahara wasn't always a desert. Around 10,000 years ago, it was a lush green savanna, teeming with rivers, lakes, animals, people. A fertile plain, just like Plato described. Historians still debate whether the Richat structure could have hosted a civilization. Officially, there's no evidence, no cities, no writing, no tools, just rock. And yet the surrounding region has yielded ancient artifacts, signs of habitation, and megalithic structures buried in the sands. Some researchers suggest the entire Sahara is hiding remnants of a forgotten epoch, one scrubbed from history, not by malice, but by sand and time. You walk along one of the outer ridges of the Richat. The terrain dips and rises in broad arcs. The heat plays tricks on your vision, but the geometry is there. And geometry rarely lies. The eye of the Sahara is so symmetrical, so vast, that you can only see its true form from above. Which raises a question, why does it look designed? Geologists will tell you it's just a coincidence of erosion, differential weathering of rock layers. They'll cite examples of similar domes around the world, but none are as large, or as circular, or as evocative. And then there's the magnetism. Some parts of the Richat show unusual magnetic anomalies. Minor, yes, but strange. As if something beneath the surface isn't playing by the usual rules. Could it be mineral deposits? Sure. Could it be something else? That's where the theories go off the rails. Some say the eye was once an energy hub, a center of planetary resonance used by an advanced pre-Ice Age civilization. Others suggest it was a capital city, Atlantis, or something like it, engineered with sacred geometry, connected to star alignments and global grid lines. Too far-fetched, maybe. But history is full of things we once thought impossible. Remember Gobekli Tepe, a megalithic temple built 6,000 years before the pyramids. Remember the Bimini Road, the Yonaguni Monument, the submerged cities off the coasts of India and Cuba, all dismissed, then reconsidered. The Earth has a long memory, and the sand covers a lot. You reach the center of the structure, a broad, flat expanse. There's no stone altar, no sunken temple, no shimmering artifact left behind. Just rock, just silence, just the whisper of possibility. And maybe that's enough, because if the Eye of the Sahara was once a city, if even one of the ancient stories is true, then we've missed something big. Something about how civilizations rise, about how they fall, about how easily they can be erased not just by water, but by doubt. Historians still debate whether Atlantis was myth, metaphor, or memory. But here, standing in the middle of a perfect spiral carved into the bones of the earth, it doesn't feel like fiction. It feels like a question, one carved too deep to ignore. The wind is harsh up here, dry, thin, biting. You're standing nearly 13,000 feet above sea level in the Andes, in a place so remote it feels like it exists outside of time. The sky is wide and unforgiving. The ground is stone and silence. This is Puma Punku, and nothing about it makes sense. Technically, Puma Punku is a part of the larger Tiwanaku archaeological complex, located in western Bolivia near Lake Titicaca. But Puma Punku is different, stranger, more precise, more impossible. It's not the size of the ruins that grabs you, it's the detail. Because what's scattered here are not crude blocks or rough stones. These are megalithic slabs of diorite and andesite stones so hard they rank just below diamond on the Mohs scale, cut with such geometric precision that some corners form perfect 90-degree angles. Holes are drilled as if by machine. Complex interlocking shapes line the fallen walls like ancient Lego bricks made from mountain stone. Let's back up. The largest stone at Puma Punku weighs an estimated 130 tons. It was quarried miles away, likely from the mountains near Lake Titicaca, and somehow transported across uneven terrain without wheels, without cranes, without even a known system of writing or engineering mathematics. So how did they do it? Historians still debate whether the Tiwanaku culture, thriving from around 500 to 1000 CE, built Puma Punku using brute labor and stone tools. But even the most conservative assessments admit that the level of precision here is unnerving. The famed H-blocks are the centerpiece of the mystery. Dozens of andesite blocks carved in a distinctive H shape, nearly identical to one another as if mass-produced. They seem designed to interlock, to stack, or connect as part of a larger system. Were they part of a modular wall? A massive gate? An unknown structure now long collapsed? No one knows. But here's the thing. You don't get this kind of consistency without advanced planning, templates, blueprints. And if you're working with diorite or andesite, you need tools harder than the stone itself, typically diamond or tungsten carbide, neither of which the Tiwanaku are known to have. So what gives? Some researchers suggest the builders used primitive techniques abrasive sand, and endless patience to grind the stones into shape. It's theoretically possible. But walk among the ruins, run your fingers along the sharp grooves and uniform notches, and you'll feel the tension between what's theoretically possible and what feels humanly plausible. This isn't a place of trial and error. This is a place of confidence. And then there's the layout. Puma Punku appears to have been a large platform or complex now toppled and scattered. But it wasn't random. The original site included precise alignments to cardinal directions. Some believe it formed part of a vast ritual center connected with the nearby Akapana pyramid and the Kalasasaya temple, just a short walk away. Together, these structures likely formed a sacred city, a center of religious, political, and astronomical power. But again, the question rises, where's the rest of it? The stones at Puma Punku are scattered, broken, dislodged. It's as if something either natural or deliberate tore the place apart. An earthquake. Possibly. Looting and erosion. Maybe. But some blocks appear, flipped, tossed, shattered like they were hit by an explosion. One theory, more controversial than most, suggests that Puma Punku was destroyed in a cataclysmic event, perhaps long before the Tiwanaku reached their peak. Some even speculate that the site predates the Tiwanaku entirely. That's right. There's a growing belief that the Tiwanaku people may have inherited Puma Punku, built on top of it, reused the stones, carried on a tradition they didn't start, much like the Egyptians with the Sphinx, or the Incas with Sacsayhuamán. A pattern emerges, one where ancient peoples preserve, revere, and repurpose ruins of civilizations even older than themselves. So who built Puma Punku? Some say it was an earlier culture lost to time and tectonics. Others reach further back to antediluvian civilizations wiped out at the end of the last ice age. And then there are the fringe theories: aliens, advanced beings, survivors from Atlantis, all the usual suspects. But let's stay grounded. There's no need for flying saucers when you already have an enigma etched in stone. Because even if Puma Punku was built by human hands, those hands knew something we've forgotten. Something about stone, about resonance, about geometry and scale and connection. You sit on one of the scattered H blocks, the wind whipping around you. It's cold up here, lonely, but the stones don't feel dead. They feel waiting, not for worship, for understanding. And maybe that's the hardest part. Puma Punku doesn't shout. It doesn't rise dramatically from the earth. It lies low, broken, whispering. And that whisper says, you don't know everything. Historians still debate whether Puma Punku was a temple, a palace, or an ancient engineering test site. The truth is likely more complicated and more interesting, because for all its mystery, one thing is certain. Puma Punku is real, not a legend, not a myth. It exists. It defies simple explanation, and it refuses to be forgotten. The sun begins to drop behind the Andean peaks, casting long shadows across the stones. You trace one last groove with your fingertip, a groove too sharp, too deep, too perfect to dismiss. And you think about how many civilizations are lost not just to time, but to assumption, to the belief that we already know how the story goes. But Puma Punku is a page we haven't translated yet, and its language, stone. The desert sun is merciless as you squint across the wide, flat plain in southern Egypt. The air ripples with heat, and yet rising in the distance is a shape that shouldn't be here. No tourists, no welcome sign. No camera crews or flashy brochures, just one of the strangest structures in the ancient world. This is the Osirion. It's hidden behind the Temple of Seti Prayer in Abydos, down a few crumbling steps that lead beneath the desert floor. From above, it looks almost accidental, like someone uncovered a basement that wasn't supposed to be found. But as you descend into the pit, past the old sandstone blocks and weather-stained corridors, you come face to face with something off. Massive granite blocks, perfectly carved, fitted together with joints so precise they almost vanish. Water pools, between them natural groundwater that rises through the floor. It gives the whole space an eerie glow, a stillness, a breath you can hear. And here's the thing, no one agrees who built it. The official narrative says the Osirion was constructed by Seti III pharaoh of the 19th dynasty, some 3,200 years ago. But one look at the blocks tells a different story. Because Seti's temple, it's made of sandstone, ornate carvings, delicate reliefs, hieroglyphs, all the marks of New Kingdom finesse. But the Osirion, it's older. The stone is granite and quartzite. The style is megalithic, cyclopean. No elaborate art, just pure geometry, massive, silent, immovable. It's like comparing a violin to a boulder. Both impressive, but not the same language. Historians still debate the origin of the Osirion. Some say Seti-I built it as a symbolic tomb for Osiris, the god of the underworld, perhaps to tie his legacy to the mythic past. Others suggest it was built atop a much older structure, a place the ancient Egyptians themselves found and chose to incorporate. That's where it gets interesting, because the ancient Egyptians weren't shy about taking credit for their monuments. They loved to etch their names into everything. And yet, in the Osirion, there are no original inscriptions, no builder's marks, just later graffiti. As if Seti didn't build it, just used it, inherited it. And if that's true, then how old is it really? Some fringe researchers propose the Osirion could date back to before the dynastic period of Egypt, before 3100 BCE. Some even suggest 10,000 BCE or earlier based on erosion patterns and stylistic comparisons to other megalithic sites. Too wild, maybe. But then again, you're standing in front of 50-ton granite blocks shaped like Lego bricks, precision-fitted, and stacked like a megalithic puzzle. Without mortar, without modern cranes. And here's the twist. Granite isn't local to Abydos. The nearest quarries are in Aswan, over 100 miles away. That's 100 miles without wheels over sand and rock, and Nile bends to move blocks heavier than modern tanks. So how? Theories range from dragging the stones on sleds soaked with water to barges floating them downriver. Others suggest some kind of forgotten technology, mechanical advantage systems we no longer understand, or even more exotic ideas: sonic levitation, resonance tools, magnetic manipulation. Sound crazy? So does fitting 50-ton granite blocks with the precision of a laser-guided saw until you're standing in front of one. The Osirion also holds another mystery. It's below ground level, deeply sunken, more like a chamber discovered than one intentionally designed to descend into. The water table creeps up through the stones, even today, adding to the feeling that this place was never supposed to be dry. Some believe it was meant to hold water, and in ancient Egyptian cosmology, water wasn't just water. It was Nun, the primordial sea of creation. The Osirion might have symbolized the moment of emergence, the act of rebirth, not just metaphorically, but architecturally. Stone rising from water, like the first mound of creation emerging from chaos. And in that light, the Osirion isn't just a temple, it's a memory, a preserved moment in myth, frozen in stone. But still, why does it look nothing like the temple above it? Why is it so much older in style, material, and technique? Why didn't SETI replicate its design elsewhere? Unless it wasn't his to replicate. Some researchers have gone so far as to connect the Osirion with the so-called pre-dynastic high civilization, a hypothetical group with advanced knowledge wiped out by catastrophe and remembered only in fragments, the Zep Tepe legends, the stories of gods walking among men, teaching them the arts of agriculture, language, and stone. That's not fringe. That's Egyptian mythology. And perhaps the Osirion is part of that myth made real. Historians still debate whether there's any truth to the idea of a lost civilization behind Egypt's earliest monuments. But from the Sphinx erosion controversy to the mystery of the bent pyramid's design, whispers of an older knowledge linger. And the Osirion, it just stands there, not offering proof, but refusing to explain itself. You sit at the edge of the chamber, watching your reflection ripple in the groundwater. It's cool here, dark, quiet, the way a sacred place should feel, not flashy, not obvious, just true. Above you, tourists chatter around SETI's beautifully carved sandstone columns, but down here, it's different, raw, heavy, unanswered, and in that silence, you hear the question again. What if history didn't begin where we think it did? What if it restarted? And this strange solemn room of unmoving stone is one of the places where the last echo of that forgotten age still waits, not to be worshipped, but to be remembered. The sea stretches out before you, endless blue and calm. But you're not here for the water. You're here for what lies beneath it. Just off the southern coast of India, near the temple town of Mahabalipuram, is a legend that speaks of cities swallowed by the sea. Not one city, not two, but 6, and only one remains above the waves. It's called the Shore Temple, and it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. An ancient sanctuary dedicated to Shiva, built of granite and standing like a sentinel at the edge of the Bay of Bengal. Waves crash against its base. Tourists marvel at its carvings. But it's what the temple doesn't show that has drawn the curiosity of explorers and historians alike. Because if the legends are true, this temple was once the last in a series of seven magnificent temples, the other 6 now lost beneath the ocean. And in 2004, the ocean pulled back the curtain. When the massive Indian Ocean tsunami struck the sea, receded dramatically before the waves surged in. For a brief moment, the coastline was laid bare, and witnesses reported seeing walls, steps, and large stone structures usually hidden underwater. The tsunami, as destructive as it was, peeled back the ocean like a curtain and revealed something ancient. When the waters returned, those glimpses vanished, but they sparked something. Archaeologists began investigating the seafloor around Mahabalipuram. Using sonar and diving expeditions, they uncovered evidence of submerged structures, rectangular blocks, platforms, and stone alignments that don't belong to nature. Some lie as far as 500 meters offshore. Others rest just beneath the waves. So what are they? Historians still debate whether these underwater features are part of a lost temple complex or natural rock formations shaped by millennia of erosion. But the shapes are striking, geometric, carved, intentional, and they align eerily well with the old stories. Local legends say the city of Mahabalipuram was so beautiful the gods became jealous and sent the sea to swallow it. The tale has survived for over 1,000 years, told by fishermen and priests passed through generations like a warning and a memory. The surviving shore temple itself dates back to the 8th century CE, built during the Pallava dynasty. But some scholars believe the site is much older, that it was built atop the ruins of earlier sanctuaries, and that the entire area was once a vast spiritual complex. Rows of temples, shrines, statues, courtyards, all extending inland and out to sea. And here's the twist, Mahabalipuram isn't alone. All along India's coasts, on both the eastern Bay of Bengal and the western Arabian Sea, there are stories of sunken cities. Dwarka, the legendary kingdom of Krishna, is said to lie beneath the waves off Gujarat. Pumpuhar, once a thriving port, now exists in fragments on the seabed. The deeper you dive into Indian lore, the more water seems to hold history hostage. Is it coincidence or a pattern? India's coastline has shifted dramatically over the last 10,000 years. Sea levels have risen over 100 meters since the end of the last ice age. Cities that once stood proudly above the surf could easily now lie submerged, eroded, buried, forgotten. But sometimes they reappear. During low tides, during seismic events, during tsunamis, just long enough to whisper, "I'm still here." You walk along the beach near the shore temple, your feet crunching over sand and shell. The air smells of salt and incense. This is still a holy place after all. The temple rises beside you, carved with gods, lions, and mythical creatures. Shiva dances in stone. Vishnu reclines in dreams. And between them lies a silence that feels expectant, like something unfinished, or perhaps something removed. One carving on the temple wall is particularly intriguing, a massive relief called Arjuna's Penance. It shows gods, animals, sages, and river spirits all emerging from a cleft in the stone. A story perhaps of divine intervention. Or maybe a map of memory. Because even in the art, the theme is water, its presence, its power, its judgment. And it makes you wonder, what if the missing temples were real? What if they now lie beneath the sediment just out of reach? And what if we're only beginning to understand how much the ocean has taken? Historians still debate the reliability of oral tradition, how much fact lies within folklore. But in India, myth and memory often walk the same road. What Western scholars call legend, local communities call history, and sometimes the sea confirms it. You descend a few meters into the surf with snorkel gear. The water is murky, stirred by tides and sediment. But then, there it is, a squared-off stone too sharp to be natural. Another beside it, then a platform. You're not in the middle of a reef. You're somewhere built. You surface lungs burning and stare back at the shore. The temple stands firm, but it's no longer alone, because now you've seen what waits below. And here's what's most unsettling. If 6 temples really did fall into the sea, they didn't vanish overnight. It would have been gradual, inevitable, stone after stone slipping beneath the waves, and the people they would have watched it happen. Helpless, what stories did they tell their children? What warnings did they carve into walls? And how many of those walls now sit in silence beneath the sea? Because Mahabalipuram doesn't just whisper of beauty, it mourns loss, not just of structures, but of knowledge, of names, of entire chapters of history erased by the ocean's slow breath. So maybe the shore temple doesn't just honor the gods. Maybe it remembers the others, the 6 that sank, the stories that didn't make it, and the moments when the sea said enough. You walk back to the shore as the tide creeps in again. The sun dips low. Tourists take their final pictures. Vendors pack up. But out there under the waves, a city sleeps, and it dreams in stone. You're standing in the middle of a desert, but not one made of sand. This is Utah, and the desert here is stone-twisted scorched, painted in reds and oranges, like the earth got caught mid-melt. You're surrounded by silence, heat, and shadows that don't seem entirely natural. And carved into the rock faces peeking from canyon walls and tucked into cliffs are figures that should not exist. The Anasazi were here, but maybe they weren't alone, because what's left behind the petroglyphs? The abandoned cities, the ghost-like ruins clinging to mesa edges, doesn't just speak of lost people. It whispers of lost contact. The ancestral Puebloans, once known as the Anasazi, built some of the most astonishing settlements in pre-Columbian North America. Their cliff dwellings at Mesa Verde, their roads and towers at Chaco Canyon, and their circular subterranean kivas all hint at a culture that was deeply organized, spiritual, and aware. But then, they vanished. Between the 12th and 13th centuries, the ancestral Puebloans began to abandon their cities. Entire regions emptied out. Buildings were left standing. Ceremonial sites sealed. No great war. No massive epidemic. Just migration or disappearance. Historians still debate what happened. Some blame climate change, decades of drought that pushed people to more fertile lands. Others point to internal conflict, social breakdown, or even religious upheaval. But here's where the mystery deepens. The art they left behind doesn't just show daily life. It shows something else. Petroglyphs and pictographs from places like Barrier Canyon, Horseshoe Canyon, and the San Rafael Swell depict elongated figures with hollow eyes, floating beings, entities with antennae, spirals, dots, beams of light. The figures are haunting, often towering over human-sized characters with limbs that taper into nothingness and heads surrounded by radiating lines. Some have wings. Others hover in ways that suggest flight or levitation. They look like spirits or something that came from the sky. Mainstream archaeologists interpret these images as shamanic visions, spiritual beings seen during trance states rituals or under the influence of psychoactive plants. And that's entirely plausible. Many indigenous cultures depict their spirit worlds in symbolic ways, but there's a problem. Some of the figures look too literal, like a memory preserved, not a hallucination imagined, and they appear again and again, across miles, across centuries, consistent in form, detail, and proportion. Is that just artistic convention or a shared experience? You walk into a narrow canyon where the temperature drops and the rock walls curve in like hands. On one wall, high above the ground, is a panel painted, not carved. The figures stand in a line, 3 tall ones, no mouths, large black eyes. One reaches out toward a spiral, its fingers a blur of motion. Another has what looks like a grid on its chest. This is the Great Gallery in Horseshoe Canyon, and it doesn't look like anything else in Native American art. No bows, no arrows, no animals. Just these forms, these presences. Some researchers believe these beings represent sky gods, part of origin myths, passed down orally through generations. Others suggest they depict actual contact with otherworldly visitors, beings from the stars. And here's the strange thing. The Hopi people, descendants of the ancestral Puebloans, speak of the Kachinas, spiritual entities that came from the sky and taught humans how to live in balance with the earth. The Kachinas wear masks. They fly. They communicate without words. Coincidence? Maybe. But other cultures around the world have similar myths. Beings from the heavens descending to teach agriculture, astronomy, medicine, law. And in every corner of the world, Egypt, Sumer, India, Mesoamerica, the theme is the same. Someone came before, someone taught. So were the Anasazi, just another thread in that global story. Historians still debate whether the artwork left by the ancestral Puebloans is literal or symbolic, spiritual or historical. But one thing is certain: the level of sophistication in their cities suggests something far more advanced than we used to believe. Take Chaco Canyon, for instance. The buildings there, massive stone complexes like Pueblo Bonito, aren't just placed randomly. They're aligned with solar and lunar cycles. The entire city may have functioned as a calendar tracking the movement of the heavens with precision. One wall, known as the Sun Dagger, uses shafts of light and shadow to mark the summer and winter solstices, as well as lunar standstills that only occur every 18.6 years. This wasn't just practical, it was sacred. The architecture, the astronomy, the ritual roads that stretched for miles all point to a people deeply connected to the cosmos, not just studying it, listening to it. So, what if the disappearance of the Anasazi wasn't just environmental? What if it was part of a cycle, an intentional migration guided by prophecy or celestial rhythm? What if they knew their time had ended? You climb into a kiva, one of the ceremonial chambers built underground, always with a hole in the floor called a sipapu, representing the portal through which the ancestors first emerged into this world. It's cool down here. Still, you feel the weight of memory in the stone, of breath held not released, and you wonder, what if the Anasazi left because they were called elsewhere, not by disaster, but by design? And what if the petroglyphs, the strange star-like figures etched across the canyons, weren't warnings, but farewells? You step back into the light. The canyon narrows again. The wind kicks up dust around your feet. Somewhere in the distance, a raven calls. The walls behind you hold their silence. But their stories, they keep watching, not just from the past, but from the sky. You're in Sardinia, now surrounded by olive trees, sun-scorched hills, and the dry perfume of Mediterranean earth. The island is ancient, older than Rome, older than Carthage, older than myth itself, and scattered across its landscape are the bones of a civilization we barely remember. They're called the Nuragic people, named for the mysterious stone towers they left behind Nurage. Over 7,000 of them dot the island, massive beehive-shaped stone structures built without mortar, many still standing after more than 3,000 years. And no one knows how or why. From a distance, a Nuraga looks like a giant chess piece, circular, sturdy, unyielding. Up close, it's even stranger. Massive basalt blocks stacked into conical towers, sometimes with spiral staircases inside narrow corridors. Corbelled ceilings and hidden chambers. Some are solitary. Others are surrounded by villages, temples, and megalithic walls. They're everywhere, yet nowhere else. This architecture is found only on Sardinia. No similar structures exist on mainland Italy or anywhere else in the ancient Mediterranean, which means either the Nuragic people were incredibly original or they were preserving something very old, something inherited from an even earlier tradition. The standard historical narrative dates the Nurage to around 1800 BCE, placing them in the Bronze Age. But here's the problem. There are no written records, no inscriptions, no carved names, just stone. The Nuragic people left behind no language that we found, no scrolls, no epics, just silence and stone. So we're left with theories. Some scholars believe the Nurage were fortresses, defensive strongholds in a landscape of tribal warfare. Others argue they were temples aligned with stars, planets, and seasonal cycles. Still, others think they were homes for chieftains, symbols of power and prestige. But nothing explains the sheer number. Over 7,000? That's not defense. That's obsession. You walk inside one Nuraj Santu Antine, one of the largest and most complex. The air is cool, the light dim. The ceiling arches above in perfect concentric layers of stone, each slightly overhanging the one below. No mortar, no cement, just balance. And it's still standing, after 3,000 years of earthquake storms and time. How? Historians still debate the engineering behind the Nurag. The blocks are massive, often weighing several tons, yet fitted together with stunning precision. The towers often include internal staircases, high windows for light, and sloped drain channels, details you'd expect from Roman architecture, not Bronze Age builders. And then there's the astronomy. Several nuragi align with solar events. The main corridor of Nuragi Losa, for example, aligns with the sunrise during the winter solstice. Others point toward lunar standstills or key points in Venus's orbit. Someone was watching the skies, but why? To mark planting seasons, ritual dates, or something more. Some researchers propose that the Nurage were part of a much larger sacred landscape. That Sardinia was once a spiritual center, a place of pilgrimage, prophecy, or power. And the towers, maybe they weren't just buildings. Maybe they were antennas, not in the modern sense, but as energetic beacons designed to resonate with the Earth itself. A few fringe theorists go even further, suggesting that the layout of the towers mirrors star constellations, that the island is one enormous forgotten map. Too far-fetched? Maybe. But here's where it gets even stranger. Sardinia is home to an unusual archaeological phenomenon, giants' graves. That's what the locals call them, tombe dei giganti. They're massive megalithic tombs, shaped like bull's horns, with long central chambers often lined with giant slabs of stone. Some measure over 30 meters in length. The myth that they were built by giants, literally. Sound familiar? Cultures around the world, from the Greeks to the Hebrews to the Irish, speak of a time when giants walked the earth. And the Nuragic stories are no different. In fact, bones found in some of these tombs are reported to be unusually large. Not 12 feet tall, not monsters, but larger than average, stronger, different. Could these stories be exaggerated memories of a powerful caste, a different lineage, a now lost people? Historians still debate whether the giants were real, symbolic, or metaphorical. But the tombs are real. The stones are enormous. And once again, we don't know how they were moved, lifted, or placed. And then there's the connection to the sea. The Nuragic people were not landlocked villagers. They were sailors. Traces of their culture have been found as far as the Balearic Islands, southern France, and even Israel. Bronze figurines, anchors, weapons. This was a people with reach. So why did they vanish? Around 800 BCE, the Nuragic civilization began to fade. Not overnight, but gradually. They were absorbed into the expanding Phoenician and Carthaginian trade networks. Then later, the Romans. But something had already shifted. The towers stopped being built. The old rituals stopped being performed, and Sardinia went quiet. Some say it was conquest, others internal collapse. But the memory of the Nurage remained, and today they still stand. Across valleys, on hillsides, in fields where sheep now graze, like ancient question marks carved into the earth. You walk back outside. The sun is lowering. The stone glows amber. The wind carries no words, only the hush of time. You look back at the tower. It doesn't look ruined. It looks unfinished, like it's still part of something bigger, something we stopped seeing. And maybe that's the lesson of the Nuragic people, that some civilizations don't disappear. They're simply waiting for us to remember what they built and why. You're walking across a windswept plateau in eastern Turkey, not far from where you stood at Gobekli Tepe. But this time, you're further into the unknown. The grass is patchy, the air thin and cool, and the landscape rolls with the quiet weight of forgotten history. And then you see them, stoneheads, staring. You've arrived at Mount Nemrut. This is not a place you stumble upon. It's remote, perched over 7,000 feet above sea level, and eerily still. But scattered across the summit are the remnants of one of the most surreal ancient constructions in the world, giant statues of gods, kings, and eagles, their heads toppled from massive seated bodies, now resting in silence, staring into eternity. It's a mountaintop mausoleum, a throne of stone above the clouds, built in the 1st century BCE by King Antiochus I Theos of Commagene, a ruler of a small and now forgotten kingdom that once existed between Rome and Persia. Antiochus, like many kings of his time, wanted to be remembered not just as a monarch, but as divine. So he built a tomb, not beneath the ground, but on top of the world. At the summit of Mount Nemrut, he ordered a massive artificial mound, 150 feet tall, made of crushed rock, beneath which he claimed his body would rest for eternity. Around the mound, he placed rows of statues himself, seated among the gods, his face carved to match theirs. His throne, rising beside Zeus, Apollo, and Heracles. That alone would be impressive. But then there's the mystery. No one has ever found the tomb. Historians still debate whether Antiochus's body truly lies beneath the mound, or whether the entire structure is symbolic, less a tomb and more a celestial monument. Ground-penetrating radar has suggested cavities inside the mound, but no one's dared excavate deeply. The rubble is unstable, and the Turkish government has restricted access for fear of collapse. And so, for now, the mountain keeps its secret. You walk between the fallen heads, each one carved from solid limestone, some over 9 feet tall. Their faces are weathered, but still expressive. Calm, proud, immovable. Some wear Persian-style headdresses, others Greco-Roman laurel crowns. Antiochus wanted to blend cultures to show that his kingdom united East and West, and in that, he succeeded. But here's where things get weird. The entire monument is aligned astronomically. The eastern terrace aligns with the summer solstice sunrise. The western terrace points to the winter solstice sunset. The seated statues are positioned with deliberate precision, their gazes locked with the movement of the heavens. Some scholars believe the monument functioned as a kind of cosmic calendar, marking the passage of time, recording eclipses, maybe even predicting astronomical events. There's even a relief carving that depicts a lion surrounded by stars, a clear zodiac alignment dated to a specific conjunction that occurred in 62 BCE, the year of Antiochus's ascension. Coincidence? No chance. Mount Nemrut was meant to be a celestial stage, a place where a king could sit beside gods and watch the universe turn. But it's the intention that stuns you. This wasn't built to intimidate. It wasn't a fortress or a temple or a city. It was a message carved into the sky. Antiochus left inscriptions here, long formal declarations that he, son of Mithridates, favored of the gods, had united the divine bloodlines of East and West. He claimed descent from both Persian and Greek heroes. He insisted that future generations continue to honor the site with rituals, sacrifices, and offerings. And then at some point they stopped. No one knows exactly when the mountain was abandoned. Earthquakes toppled the statues. Snow and wind wore down the stone. The rituals faded, and the world forgot. Until 1881, when a German engineer stumbled across the site while surveying for the Ottoman Empire. Since then, archaeologists and tourists alike have climbed the winding roads to see the gods face to face. But the heart of the mountain remains untouched, still sealed, still watching. Historians still debate whether Antiochus truly believed he would sit with the gods, or if he just understood the power of a good story. Either way, the result is astonishing, because Mount Nemrut isn't just a grave. It's a statement that memory can be built into stone, that identity can be sculpted into sky, and that even a small kingdom, barely a footnote in textbooks, can challenge time itself. You sit near one of the heads, Apollo maybe, or perhaps Zeus. It's hard to tell now. The nose is worn, the chin chipped, but the eyes remain, staring not at you, but through you. And you think about what we've seen. Gobekli Tepe, Teotihuacan, Angkor Wat, Yonaguni, the Nazca Lines, Puma Punku, each one strange, each one incomplete, each one carved with more questions than answers. And yet, here's the thread: intention. None of these places were accidents. They were built with knowledge, with purpose, with connection to forces larger than any one king or priest or engineer. They were meant to last, meant to speak, meant to whisper across centuries, and the whispers have reached you. Now the wind picks up, the light turns golden, and the mountain breathes. You stand, slowly brushing dust from your shoes. There's one last thing to notice. Antiochus left instructions. He said his legacy would continue as long as people kept climbing the mountain, as long as they looked up, as long as they remembered. And now you have, which means it worked.